The One That Got Away, written by Lexi Mears. Published by Harley Romance Publishing, 2021. Chapter 1. Cassidy. The welcoming aroma of my favorite coffee shop enveloped me like a comfy blanket on a cold winter's night. It reminded me of the snowy evenings I would sit in front of the fire at my mother's house, while indulging in a book all about love and cliched events that were prelude to an inevitable happily ever after ending. Someone shoved me from behind, urging me forward. Okay. Relax. I was stuck in a never-ending line inside a coffee shop in the financial district, waiting for my morning brew. Even though I'd been living in Denver for years, I still wasn't used to the hustle and bustle of it during rush hour. I was born and raised in the small town of Crested Butte, Colorado, nestled between two mountain ranges. A real little mountain town, where everyone knew everyone, which was both a big blessing and an annoyance of living there, especially for a kid. We were always safe and well taken care of, but when we were the ones being reckless, we were busted. Over and over again. I still imagine myself riding down Alpine View Lane on my bike, the wind in my hair, whizzing past the well-maintained houses. Order for Cassidy. I pushed through the crowd of people and grabbed my cappuccino, then headed out the door as quickly as I could. Luckily, I still had a few minutes to walk to my destination. Scoring an interview at one of the most prestigious companies in the city was a dream come true, and the starting salary was more than I had ever earned in my life. It was for an executive assistant's position at Emmerdale & Quinn, a company that did insurance claims, something I didn't have much experience with but was willing to learn. I've been told I'm a quick study, so the intimidation factor was low. The fresh autumn air was crisp and for a moment I could breathe, until a van with a broken tailpipe spoiled the moment and polluted the area around me. At times I wished I didn't have to work in the city, but the money was here and I needed it. My little brother Nathan, who was not so little anymore, had been in an accident a few months back and been critically injured. He'd fractured his spine in 2 places and required 3 separate surgeries in quick succession. Money was tight, there were gaps in his insurance coverage, and since he had to stay in the hospital and both outparents were gone, I was the one who had to work twice as hard to make sure all the bills were paid. Of course they weren't. Medical bills were insanely high, especially in Nathan's case. He required orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, and inpatient care. Applying for a job that required experience I didn't have was a bold move, but I was optimistic. I had to be. I crossed the street and walked along the sidewalk towards the address I had burned into my brain. To say I'd been excited to receive the call to set up the interview appointment was an understatement, and I'd been laser-focused on researching the company online ever since. I did do a dorky little happy dance, which no one should ever be allowed to see. I told Nathan about the interview when I visited him at the hospital, but he wasn't in the best mood, so I just left. I was an overall positive person, but I didn't want to get my hopes up. This was a little out of my comfort zone, as well as above my qualifications, but the fact that they called me back to arrange an interview seemed like a good sign, or at least a good starting point. I only had one chance to impress them, and that was exactly what I was going to do. I ditched my normal casual ponytail for an elegant bun at the nape of my neck, pulling my hair out of my face. A suit with a black pencil skirt and short tailored jacket along with a light pink blouse was both professional looking and kept me warm on this brisk fall day. A pair of new, inexpensive black heels finished off my look. I hadn't paid a lot of money for them, but they were comfortable enough that I could wear them for hours and not have aching feet. I only had a block to go when I realized that I was going to be late for the interview. I picked up the pace and soon found myself in front of an endless set of stairs leading up to the building of Emmerdale & Quinn. Oh shit. This is going to be bad, I muttered to myself as I began to climb the stairs one by one as my skirt was tight, a fashion choice I would regret for the rest of my life. The stairs lay before me like a daunting obstacle course, and when I finally reached the top, my heart was pounding like I'd run a marathon, but worst of all, a large digital clock on the glass wall showed me what I'd been dreading. I'm late. I rushed to the mirrored glass door, and as I was about to open it, someone came through from the other side after pushing it open forcefully. Damn. My chest was on fire and I struggled to breathe. It wasn't because I was late or because I had to climb a million stone steps in a tight skirt, but thanks to the door being pushed in my face, my coffee had spilled all over my light pink shirt. Oh my gosh. "I am so sorry," the man said to me. "Can I get you a napkin?" I glanced up at him and shook my head. "No, I'm running late, but thank you." As the man walked away, the door closed and I caught sight of my reflection. A miserable sigh escaped my throat and my shoulders slumped. My pink shirt was stained with coffee, which was also dripping down my skirt and onto the ground. I threw the empty coffee cup in the trash can a few feet away from the door and wiped my hands with the soaked napkin. Things couldn't get any worse, could they? I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself that everything was going to be fine, buttoned my jacket, attempting to hide my coffee-soaked shirt as much as possible, and pushed through the glass door. Maybe there would be enough time for me to visit the restroom and try to salvage my shirt and whatever dignity I had left. The reception area of Emmerdale & Quinn was massive, with luxury seating in hues of grays with teal throw pillows and glass accents. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling, and the front desk was made entirely of marble. A gorgeous redhead wearing a headset sat behind the desk, and I quickly walked over to her. "Good morning and welcome to Emmerdale & Quinn," she spoke with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" "Good morning. My name is Cassidy Moore. I'm here for an interview for the executive assistant position." The redhead glanced briefly at the clock on the wall. Heat flushed my neck and cheeks. "I'm a few minutes late, I know. I wasn't expecting all those stairs. I bet you guys are super fit, right?" I expelled a nervous giggle, but when the redhead glanced at me blankly, I knew she didn't find me the least bit amusing. "Look, I spilled my coffee and I was wondering if there was a restroom I could use. Mr. Ross doesn't like it when people are late. In fact, it is the one thing he doesn't tolerate," she said curtly, with a hint of sass only a redhead could pull off. I had absolutely no idea how to respond to that. When I was about to open my mouth, she spoke into her headpiece, holding her hand up to silence me. "Mr. Ross, your first potential candidate has arrived." "Yes, she is. I know how you feel about that, Mr. Ross." "Of course." She glanced up at me with her green gaze, and even though my face was flaming hot with embarrassment, my blood ran cold. A feeling of impending doom slithered its way up my spine, and I pursed my lips. "The restrooms are up the escalator to your right, first door on the left. Your interview will be in the second office on the right. Mr. Ross is already waiting for you, so I suggest you hurry or you'll never have to walk up those steps again." And judging by the look on her face, she wasn't going to give me any further instructions or warnings. Her eyes did that all on their own. I made my way to the escalators as fast as I could, passing through a security gate, and handed a visitor's pass to the security guard. I had to stay positive and focused. I was counting on getting this job, so I could start paying off the mountain of medical bills waiting for me on my kitchen table. The escalator allowed me to take a few deep breaths, get my shit together and calm down. This was going to be fine, better than fine actually. I was an intelligent young woman who was able to do anything I set my mind to. I could do this. I walked down the hallway and entered the restroom. I needed to be quick. I was already on thin ice with Red downstairs, and I was pretty sure she would mention her blatant disgust for me with her boss. Mr. Ross. Hopefully, he wasn't as intimidating as he sounded. I glanced at myself in the mirror. Shorter tendrils of hair hung loosely around my face, and my elegant low bun was now just a bit of a mess. No wonder Red looked at me with such disapproval. I didn't attempt to fix it. Instead, I removed the hairpins and let my long blonde hair tumble down my shoulders. I looked better with my hair down anyway. Grabbing a few paper towels from the dispenser, I blotted my shirt a few times just to get some of the coffee out. I glanced at my watch and groaned as I threw the wet paper towel into the wastebasket and rushed out of the restrooms, searching for the second door on the right. Around me, people diligently worked, and it seemed a little more relaxed than the formal lobby area. I was eyed by the employees I passed, and I simply gave them a friendly nod. Reciprocation was minimal, but then again, they'd never seen me before. I reached the second door and stopped in front of it. Inhaling deeply, I tugged on the bottom of my jacket with both hands to straighten it, then lifted my right hand and tapped my knuckles lightly on the door. "Come in," a voice sounded from inside. The tone was impatient and familiar for some strange reason. Maybe it was true that all executives sounded alike, as they did in the movies. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened the door and stepped inside. The room was brighter than I expected, sunlight shining in through the large window to my right. There was a great view of Lodoo as well. Two teal-colored love seats faced one another with a low coffee table between them, giving me the sense that it wasn't quite as formal as I expected. The atmosphere was comforting, comfortable almost. The silhouette of a man dressed in a black suit stood by the window with his back to me, and I closed the door. "You must be Mr. Ross," I said and moved towards him. "I'm Cass?" My body froze as the familiar voice echoed through my mind as the man turned around. My eyes widened while I stood motionless, unable to move a muscle. In front of me stood the one person I was certain I would never see again in my entire life. Or at least I'd hoped I wouldn't. "Liam?" I breathed. He slowly and carefully approached me, and a flood of memories came rushing back to me. The football practices I watched on the bleachers at our high school. The homecoming game. All the summers we spent together, the clear starry nights, the snowball fights, the hot cocoa we drank at the bonfires prom night. The wonderful memories of us together in Crested Butte. Of course the bad memories rushed back in too, drowning me like a tidal wave. The sight of his car driving out of my driveway the last time I saw him. The tears I wasted on him for months. Not a single phone call from that moment. Nothing. The nights I'd spent alone in all the places we used to go. Driving around endlessly trying to figure out what I had done wrong. Why he didn't want me anymore. Why I wasn't good enough for him. Hot tears blurred my vision. Everything around me was frozen in time, and I was unable to move. I let out a slow breath, the breath I'd been holding since I saw his face. After all these years he looked exactly the same. Light green eyes, brown-styled hair. The 5 o'clock shadow on his face, the dimple in his right cheek. His broad shoulders, his beautiful hands, and the way he smelled. Everything was the same. Except it wasn't. Before me stood a stranger, somebody I used to know.
Chapter 2. Liam. I'm never easily surprised. I've studied human behavior for almost 10 years in this business. Their cues, their body language, and my perceptive nature were all partly the reason for my success. I could read people, and I could read them well, which was something not many could do. I could catch people in a lie, analyze them within a few minutes of meeting them, all the while making them feel comfortable. That was crucial in my line of work. As a senior executive for Emmerdale & Quinn, I liaised with important clients and had to build strong working relationships with them. But it was getting to the point where I needed an assistant who could do the tasks I didn't have time for. Coordinating meetings, sorting out the paperwork, and drawing up contracts. I'd had an assistant, Katie, but she resigned unexpectedly after the stunt she pulled a few weeks ago. The last few weeks have been tough. Not only was my schedule packed with my normal responsibilities, I now had the added burden of interviewing potential new assistants. So far, the candidates were not promising, and that didn't surprise me. Nothing did anymore. But seeing Cassidy standing in front of me surprised the hell out of me, and I was left speechless. She was even more beautiful than I remembered. Her long blonde hair hung down on her narrow shoulders, and her blue eyes were wide and bright. "What are you doing here?" I asked eventually. Her shoulders tensed at my question, and she inhaled deeply. "You're Mr. Ross?" "Oh shit, she's here for an interview." "I am," I said with a nod. "How have you been?" "Good." Silence stretched uncomfortably. "How long have you been in Denver?" "You're Mr. Ross," she muttered again, the disappointment in her tone painfully obvious. I cleared my throat. "Yes." "Have a seat." "Sure." I watched as she took off her jacket and noticed the coffee stain on her light pink shirt as she sat down. "Rough morning?" I asked as I sat down as well. "A little bit," she answered curtly. I shifted in my seat and cleared my throat. "You're here for the executive assistant position." "Right, but I didn't know it was for you." That was pretty obvious by now. She looked like she wanted to run. Every muscle in her body was tense, and her discomfort was palpable. "If you did, would you have still applied?" She frowned. "Getting this job isn't about you, Liam." I leaned forward. "What is it?" "I don't want to talk about it," she answered and straightened her shoulders. Something was bothering her. Maybe it was me, and I didn't blame her one bit. After the way I'd treated her all those years ago, I was surprised she hadn't yet punched me in the face. "So, what makes you think you're qualified to be my assistant?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to my work. I'm hardworking, I'm always on time, except for today for some reason. The steps got to you, didn't they? Cass glanced at me and nodded slowly. Yeah. I've never been one for steps. I know, I whispered and cleared my throat again, glancing down at her resume. What else? I have excellent telephone and computer skills. I work quickly and efficiently with minimal mistakes, and I really feel like I can be a great asset too. Her voice trailed and her gaze met mine. To you. I skimmed through her impressive list of scholastic accomplishments. You attended UC Denver with a pre-law major and a business minor. Then went on to earn your paralegal certificate. Her mouth dropped open a little. I assumed in surprise that I surmised everything so quickly. But then she lifted her chin and plowed forward. That's right. Business law was my favorite subject, and I wanted to have a well-rounded education. You graduated magna cum laude at the top of your class, I said, not surprised how well she'd done in pursuing her goals. She had been the same when I knew her. Ambitious. And would do anything to achieve her goals. I admired her for that, and I'd loved her focus. Loved. You have an impressive resume. Thank you. I've been looking forward to getting a job in the city that's more in my wheelhouse, she pointed out. I couldn't help asking, why haven't you been working as a paralegal? You should be. She shrugged, her mouth twisting. After college I moved home to look after Mom when she got sick, then Nathan got hurt and, well, I've been working anywhere I could get a job really. But I want to get back into the field that I studied for. I tapped my fingers on the table in front of me, studying her intently for a moment. You would be an incredible asset to this company, and to me. She stared at me quietly and pursed her lips. Why do I get the feeling you're about to tell me that I am not getting this job? I shifted back on the couch. I can't give you this job. Not because you don't deserve it, but because you're better than this. Excuse me? She asked as her eyebrows rose on her forehead. You're overqualified for an assistant's job. I don't want you to waste your talent here. Is it because we used to know each other? She asked. Her words stung more than I'd like to admit, but they were partially true. We didn't know each other anymore. Too much time had passed and too many things had happened. No, it's not that. I don't. Please tell me, she insisted. I exhaled through my nose and decided to tell the truth. I can't hire you because you're too attractive, you're a female, and I'm in a bit of a legal situation at the moment. Her eyebrows narrowed. What kind of legal situation? Are you in trouble? In a way. My previous assistant, the one who recently resigned. She slapped me with a sexual harassment lawsuit, which I am now dealing with. It made my whole being shudder in disgust to admit such a thing. Sexual harassment? Are you kidding me? Her tone was razor sharp now. I shook my head. No. I wish I were. Why am I not surprised? She scoffed, crossing her arms and her legs. A very clear sign of being angry and upset. I looked at her, a bit startled. You think I would do something like that? Who knows what you're capable of, she answered snidely. Not this. Surely she didn't think I would harass an employee. What sort of snake did she think I was? Did you have sex with her and forget to call her too? She asked, glaring as though the 10-year-old wound were still fresh. No, I answered simply. She claimed I came on to her and suggested inappropriate things. Things I wanted to do to her, I explained, not quite sure why I felt so defensive. We hadn't seen one another in more than 10 years, but it still felt like I could tell her anything, even if it meant her cutting me with her words. The contempt was visible in her eyes now, and she shifted in her seat, as if to place more distance between us. Did you? Of course not. You know I would never do something like that, I defended. She scoffed again. I don't know you well enough to make that kind of assumption. I just asked if you did, from a legal perspective. Her words were like knives in my chest, but once again I deserved them. Right? No, I didn't. You can't hire me because of the lawsuit, or... We have history too, Cass. Please don't call me that, she said with a frown and stood up from the couch. I can help you get a job, I said, feeling the desperation rise inside me. One that is more suited to your qualifications. I have a friend who owns a law firm, and you'd be perfect there. They specialize in business law, representing companies with civil matters. They'd be happy to have someone like you there. She glanced at me and pursed her lips. I don't want you to do me any favors. It's the least I could after everything I put you through. Her eyes narrowed for a moment and she took a step towards me. I'm not ungrateful for your help, Liam, but nothing you do now is going to fix what you did back then. My gut tightened as though she'd punched me, but I kept my composure. I'm not that guy anymore, and if you would just give me a chance to prove that. No. I can't do that, she interjected. Cass, please. I asked you not to call me that. You waived your right to call me Cass when you left me the way you did, she spat, her pained emotions evident in her blue eyes. She whirled around, opened the door and stormed out. Damn it. I took a deep breath, my chest tight from the dagger she'd thrown my way, and closed my eyes for a few seconds. I glanced down at her resume and reached for my phone, but stopped midway. I didn't want to intrude on her life, because she clearly didn't want me in it anymore. Just the sight of me had upset her, and I supposed it was only natural, but her anger and pain were obviously still so raw. I'd have thought after all this time she would have moved on and forgotten all about me. I sat quietly on the teal couch until Jenna called me, asking if she could send the next applicant up. No, I'm done for the day. I have an emergency to deal with. Have them reschedule. Mr. Ross, it's only 10 o'clock. Don't question me, Jenna. Now is not the time. Just do as I say. Yes, of course, Mr. Ross. My apologies. The call ended, and even though I shouldn't have directed my anger and disappointment at Jenna, she knew better than to question me about anything. I left the interview room, rushed to my office to collect a few things, then left the building. Jenna was busy on a call when I walked past, but her eyes focused on me for a moment before she cast them down to the keyboard in front of her. The drive home from the office was brief, and the weight lifted from my shoulders as soon as I stepped into my home. My safe place. It was really the only place where I felt at ease, except for today. For the few minutes I'd spent with Cass, I'd been happy again, before she'd reminded me what a shitty asshole I was back then. A nauseating feeling rose in my stomach, and I dropped my head. I had to do something about this. I grabbed my phone and dialed Eric's number. Eric Hartman, he answered. Hey, Eric. It's Liam. Liam, how are you? I've been better. Did something happen? Did Katie? No, she didn't do anything else. Do you still have a vacancy for a paralegal at your firm? I do, but I'm not going to take on any of your girlfriends, Eric said. I shook my head. No, this isn't anything like that. I was doing interviews for a new assistant, and this woman came in. She had such an impressive resume, completely overqualified to be an assistant. She finished in the top 3 in her class at UC Denver, and graduated with a perfect 4.0. She's got her paralegal certificate as well, and I thought she'd be a great fit in a law office. Wow, that's quite impressive. How do you know her? We used to live in the same town when we were kids, can you believe that? I tried to sound genuine, because I was telling almost the whole truth. Okay. You can email her resume to me. It sounds promising. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. And I did. I'd never thought I'd be able to make up being suck a shit to Cass, but I had to try. How are you really doing? Especially with this whole thing? As I said, I've been better. I feel powerless and... I raked my fingers through my hair and sighed. I honestly don't even know how I feel. I just wish this would all go away. So do I. You're my best friend, and I know you're an upstanding guy, Liam. You wouldn't do something like this. But you have to know it's going to get worse until it gets better. Katie's lawyers are going to make sure they dig up every ounce of dirt on you and try to use it against you. I know. Is there anything that would implicate you in the past? I sighed and sat back on the couch, trying to think of anything remotely related to harassment, but the only thing I could think of was Cass. Her face flashed in my mind, that beautiful face, and her voice resonated inside me. I wasn't over her, clearly. Or not as much as I'd believed I was. No, not that I can think of. Well, if you do, you have to tell Morgan. Obviously. He's my lawyer. I tell him everything. Poor guy, Eric joked, which made me smile for a second. I have to go. I have something I need to do, I told him, sitting upright on the couch. Sure, buddy. Take care. You too. I placed the phone on the table in front of me and sat motionless for a few seconds before I stood. God, I felt old. Old and tired. I went and took a hot shower and changed into some comfortable clothes. Time for a trip down memory lane. I entered my home office and opened the corner closet. From the top shelf, I retrieved a photo album, one I hadn't looked at for months, then placed it on my desk. I sank into my leather chair and opened it to the first page. Cass's smiling face, along with me by her side, graced most of the pictures, but as I flicked through the pages, I searched for the one photograph that I used to look at whenever I could. It had been taken on a bright, sunny day. The last snow of the season had fallen, and Cass had insisted we build a snowman before everything turned to sludge. And of course we did. I rarely said no to the woman when she was enthusiastic about something. I'd grabbed her camera and taken a picture of her as she playfully threw a handful of snow at me, resulting in the most beautiful photo of her. Her eyes were bright blue against the white snow behind her, and it was one of the moments where she'd been at her happiest. I'd been at my happiest. But that hadn't good enough for me. I paged through the album, looking at her face in each photo, her expression so full of life and love and happiness. I always knew when she was upset, when her brother was being a little shit, or when she was stressed out during exams. She had always been so easy to read, but I'd never realized how much I hurt her when I'd left. If only she'd give me a chance to make things right between us, let me be who she deserved, but I was pretty sure that ship had sailed. It was such a long time ago. We weren't the same people anymore. Those two young people in the photographs no longer existed. Our love didn't either. It was gone. And it was all my fault.
Chapter 3. Cassidy. I walked through the revolving doors of Sutter Rehabilitation Hospital and smiled at the receptionist, who knew me by name now. My head was still spinning from my interview this morning. Seeing Liam had brought back so many feelings I'd thought were dead and buried. Learning that Liam was being sued for sexual harassment by his previous assistant was a bit of a shock, but it only proved to me that he hadn't changed. He was still the same selfish asshole who left me in Crested Butte without as much as a goodbye. The emptiness ached inside me as I walked down the hallway to Nathan's room, and I came to a standstill in front of his door. I didn't want him to see me like this, all broken and upset. He didn't need a sister who couldn't keep her shit together. I had to be strong for him, and being upset over a guy from my past over something that happened such a long time ago was just plain stupid. I had told myself for years that I was over him, and that I deserved better. But as much as I wanted to hate him, which I did, a part of me still loved him. A part I tried to deny, to destroy, and failed. I took a deep breath, swallowed my feelings, and opened the door. My little brother was in his hospital bed, flicking angrily through the channels. As soon as he saw me, he smiled his usual crooked smile. "Hey," I greeted him and placed my bag on the reclining chair in the corner of the room. "How are you feeling?" "Still paralyzed from the waist down, so I'm going with not so good," Nathan grumbled. "How about you?" "I've been better," I sighed and sat down on the edge of the bed. "I went for an interview this morning." "The one in the financial district?" "That's the one," I answered. "And? How did it go?" "Catastrophic," I answered honestly. I spilled coffee all over my favorite blouse. I was late, and then when I eventually got to the interview itself, it turned out I was overqualified according to. My voice trailed off as Liam's face popped into my mind. His green eyes, his perfect jawline, the way he smelled. "Cassie?" I glanced up and my confused gaze met Nathan's. "According to who?" he asked. I let out a sigh and shook my head. "The guy who interviewed me. He said I was overqualified for the job, and he didn't want me to waste my talents by being his assistant." "That was kind of nice of him," Nathan pointed out. I shrugged my shoulders. I was really counting on getting that job, but now that I think about it, I wouldn't have fit in there. It was way too stuffy, and my boss would have been such a pain. "Things happen for a reason, sis," Nathan sighed. I glanced at him with a frown and pursed my lips. My little brother was 6 years younger, but he was wise beyond his years, something I had always loved about him. He was the most mature male I knew. So if Nathan was right, what was the reason Liam and my path crossed once again? I shrugged my shoulders, as it wasn't something I wanted to talk about or even think about at the moment. I needed to spend an hour with Nathan and then concentrate on finding a job, and fast. I guess so. There's even a reason why I'm in this hospital bed right now, not being able to walk. Nathan? No, it's fine, Cassie. I'm not trying to win your sympathy or make you feel guilty or anything. I know you're doing your best, and you should be proud of yourself that you made it this far, he said to me. I glanced at him, pursing my lips to stop the tears from spilling onto my cheeks. He was the only one who'd ever called me Cassie. When he was a toddler, it was easier for him to pronounce than Cassidy, but as he grew, he'd never taken to calling me by my given name. We spent the rest of the hour talking about the most random things, like we always did. My visit was almost up when he said, "I found the perfect guy for you." What? Impossible. You heard me, Nathan answered smugly. And where did you find this perfect man? I asked and cocked my head. He works here at the hospital. I see him twice a week. Are you talking about your physical therapist? So you have noticed him, Nathan winked. Of course I had. I noticed everything. And the PT was hot in that young, cute sort of way. He's your physical therapist, I defended. And? I had more important things to focus on, like getting a job. I'll put in a good word for you tomorrow, he said with a wink. Please don't. He definitely doesn't need to go on a date with a woman who is neck-deep in debt. You got that? You're such a buzzkill. I sighed and nodded at him. I know. It's just who I am. My eyes flashed briefly to the clock on the wall and I sighed. I have to go. I know. I wish I could stay longer. No. I don't expect you to sit here and entertain me. You have a life too. I do. I chuckled and twisted my fingers in my hair. I'll see you tomorrow. My PT is at 3, Nathan winked at me. Noted, thank you. There were a few moments of silence between us, and as I slid off the bed, Nathan grabbed my hand. Thank you. For what? He glanced at me solemnly and answered, for everything. For working hard and taking care of me. You're my brother, Nathan. You're the only family I have left. If I don't do it, then who will? I shrugged, trying hard to fight back the tears in my eyes. This situation made me feel so useless, so helpless. It was crap. I love you, he said, his voice sounding a little hoarse. I leaned over and pulled him into a tight embrace. I love you too, buddy. I closed my eyes for a moment and felt the tears make their way down my cheek. As I pulled away, I quickly wiped them away and smiled at him. You're crying now? He muttered. I'm fine, I swear, I defended. Being an adult isn't as fun as I thought it would be, and before you say anything about you being a burden, that's not true. You'll never be a burden to me. I'm just going through a few things, but I'm okay. I promise. I had to be. That's not what I asked, but since you brought it up, is there anything I can do? You're alive, so that already helps. You should just focus on getting better, so we can get you the hell out of here, okay? You just leave the adulting to me, I answered, trying hard to assure not only Nathan but myself as well. And you're sure you can handle it? I'm trying, I said simply. It's just been a hard day, that's all. Nothing a bubble bath and pizza can't fix, right? Right? While I waste away on hospital food and showers with a nurse named Fred. I suppressed a laugh and shook my head. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Enjoy. Pretty soon I'll be home and annoying the living hell out of you, he promised. I'm counting the days, I said, paused for a moment before turning to the door. Bye, buddy. He gave me a casual wave and I left. As I approached the front desk, Sarah, the receptionist, waved me over. Cassidy? Hey, Sarah. How are you? I asked quietly. Pretty good, yourself? I've been better, thank you. I didn't know what else to say. Sarah knew my situation. She'd known about it from the start, so she would understand my less than enthusiastic response. I shouldn't be so bitter. After all, she did care, and she'd been caring enough to help us out on more than one occasion. Listen, the billings department asked me to send you down. Of course they did. Yes, okay. Sarah grimaced out a smile. It will only take a minute. Would you mind popping down to see them straight away? I nodded. What else was I going to do? The billings department was on the same floor, at the other end of the longest corridor you'd ever seen. When I finally reached the stark white offices, I rang the little bell and was soon confronted with an older woman I'd seen on more than once occasion. Can I help you? Yes. My name is Cassidy Moore, I was told to speak to you. The woman with spangly purple nail polish pushed her glasses up her nose and began tapping on the computer in front of her. Then she turned to me and said in a voice that made my spine shiver, "We didn't receive your last payment." Ah. That's because I didn't make it yet. It wasn't because I'd forgotten or didn't have the time to do it. I didn't have the money. I know, I sighed and lowered my voice. I didn't want everyone to know how broke I really was and how desperate I was about to sound. I've been struggling a bit keeping up with the bills. I'm currently in between jobs and it's just been hard. The woman's gaze snapped. We really need a payment soon, Cassidy, otherwise we can't continue with Nathan's treatment and he would have to be discharged as well. My mouth fell open with shock and her brown eyes filled with sympathy. If you could just give me a few more weeks, I begged, which I hated to do but would do anything for my brother. Please. The woman stared at me for a moment, and I was pretty sure she could see the desperation in my eyes. She sighed and glanced back at the computer, her gaze flicking over whatever information she was reading. I'll try to postpone the date on the invoice as much as I can, but I can only give you a few weeks. Understood? I nodded gratefully and said, yes. Thank you. I know this shouldn't concern you, you're just doing your job. I promise I will pay as soon as I can. The older woman suddenly reached over and placed her hand reassuringly on mine. I fought back the tears again. I took a deep breath and left the hospital just in time before the tears spilled down my cheeks again. I stood beside my car in the parking lot and began to tremble. I was in full-on panic mode as I climbed into my car and sat there. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think about anything except what a failure I was. I had bills piling up and my brother was depending on me. I couldn't even get a stupid assistant's job. I lowered my face onto the steering wheel and sobbed like I hadn't done in a long time. The last time was when Liam had left me and I growled at myself as Liam invaded my mind. Those memories still haunted me, just as much as they had 10 years ago. I still remembered the first morning after he left. I woke up crying, much like I was right now, because my heart hurt so much I couldn't breathe. But I had to get up and pretend I was perfectly fine without him. Get the fuck out of my head. I sobbed. I couldn't stay like this. It was ridiculous. I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror and came to the ultimate conclusion. I was a mess. Again. Still. I wiped my face with the tissues in my car and took a few deep breaths to calm myself. I couldn't drive in the state I was in, so I sat for a few minutes and contemplated my horrible life. When I was finally ready to go, I drove home. We owned the small house thanks to our early inheritance. We'd sold Mom's family home, and the money had been enough to let me buy this house and left enough aside so that most of Nathan's bills had been paid for initially anyway. I'd moved Nathan and I into the new place as soon as I had been able to, and it had been our saving grace when money was tight. Not having to find a mortgage or rent. But the house was empty, and the cold feelings hit me as soon as I stepped through the door. Empty like me. I dropped my bag on the couch and headed for my bedroom to change into something more comfortable than my coffee-stained interview suit. After dressing in my oldest, softest sweats, I scoured the fridge for something to eat. I planted myself and my leftover sandwich down on the couch and covered my lower body with my fluffy purple blanket. Ever since Nathan's accident, I couldn't sleep in my own room. The memory of that night still haunted me. Getting a phone call from the hospital to say my little brother was in emergency surgery, after arriving at the hospital in a critical condition after a near-fatal car accident, shook me to my core. Every time my phone rang at night, I would get a nauseous feeling in the pit of my stomach before answering. Given Nathan was possibly facing 2 additional surgeries, I was an emotional mess. I couldn't lose him too. I devoured the sandwich in silence, then turned on the television for a means of distraction. My brain was muddled, and if I could drown it out with some mindless television shows, then so be it. I heard my phone ring in my bag and I reached for it, although as much as I didn't want to speak to anyone, I had to answer. It could be important. Hello? Hello, is this Cassidy Moore? My spine automatically straightened and my eyes widened. This is she. Good afternoon, Ms. Moore. This is Lindsay from the offices of Hartman & Cole. I was instructed by Mr. Hartman to contact you with regards to the paralegal position we have available at the firm. Holy shit. Paralegal position? I stuttered. I don't remember sending my resume to you. Are you sure? As I mentioned, I was told to contact you and arrange an interview with Mr. Hartman at your earliest convenience. Yes. Yes, of course. When would be a good time? I am pretty flexible at the moment. That was the understatement of the century. Very well. Would tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock work for you? Yes, that is perfect. Our address is 235 Montgomery Street. Do you require directions to our offices? No, I have a pretty good idea where it is, but thank you. Do I need to bring anything with me? Like my blood? I'd do anything to get a paralegal position right now. That won't be necessary. Mr. Hartman has your resume on file, and he's really looking forward to meeting with you. How that was possible, I had no idea. And I'm looking forward to meeting with him as well. Very well, he'll certainly appreciate your optimism. We will see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. Have a great day. You're welcome, and the same to you. I heard the call disconnect, and my hand dropped down onto my lap, still holding my phone. I couldn't believe it. I had an interview at a law firm as a paralegal. I hadn't even sent them my resume, so how? Then it occurred to me, and the thought made me shiver. Liam had said he would find me a job more suited to my skills. And he had. For once, Liam had come through for me. I grabbed a nearby pillow and hugged it to my chest. I wanted to believe that Liam had changed. That he was doing this out of the goodness of his heart. Because despite everything I'd gone through, a part of me still believed that deep down he was a nice guy. But my history with him made me doubt his ability to care, especially about me. Nonetheless, I didn't want him to do me any favors. I didn't want to owe him anything. But as I glanced over at my dining room table piled high with medical bills, a wave of gratitude washed over me. Sometimes swallowing your pride was the only option. Maybe, just maybe, things were changing for the good. Now all I needed to do was get through that interview.
Chapter 4. Liam. Where did you find that woman? Eric asked when I answered my phone the next afternoon. Who are you talking about? I asked, hoping he wasn't referring to Katie, as she had been tormenting me enough. Cassidy Moore. At the mention of my former girlfriend's name, my shoulders relaxed and I sat back in my chair. Did you interview her? I did, and I must say she is pretty phenomenal. I told you, I said with a smile. If there was one thing I knew about Cass, was that she was indeed incredible, but hearing it from Eric was gratifying. I wasn't delusional, with judgment clouded by the past. She's smart and witty, and that resume of hers is perfect. There was only one thing wrong with her, though. What? I asked, holding my breath. Whatever it was, I sure we could work something out. She wasn't working for me. I rolled my eyes and couldn't help but smile at Eric's laughter on the phone. I'm glad you found her impressive. When does she start? Tomorrow. Lindsay is drafting her employment contract now, seeing as I know she is a perfect fit because you recommended her. I trust your judgment, obviously. So thanks, Liam. I appreciate the referral. This position had been waiting for someone as special as Cassidy, and I'm grateful you sent her my way. You don't have to thank me, Eric. I'm just glad she's a good fit. Oh, ain't that the truth? I asked her about the Freeding case I'd been working on, in general terms of course, just to pick her brain and observe her thought process. She gave me a quick solution, which was so obvious, yet clever and insightful. I smiled proudly. She is beautiful too. No, Eric. Don't go there. Don't make me drive to your office and beat the shit out of you. I'm glad I could help, I said simply. Are you up for a drink after work? Eric asked. My jaw clenched and I shook my head. I already have plans, but maybe next time. Sure. See ya. The call disconnected and I stared blankly for a few minutes, trying to figure out my next move. A knock on my office door had me reeling back to the present moment, and I glanced at Jenna as she walked in the door. Hey. I brought your lunch as requested, she said, placing the brown embossed box on my desk. Thank you. Is everything okay? She asked. You seem a little distracted. I considered my options, then forged forward. A woman's opinion couldn't hurt. Can I ask you something? Of course. You can ask me anything. I took a deep breath, which made Jenna frown, and she turned and closed the door behind her. What's going on? Did Katie do something? No, this isn't about Katie, I muttered. Okay. Then what is this about? Jenna asked. Do you believe that things happen for a reason, that people are inserted in your life at a certain time? I guess, she shrugged, and I glanced at her expectantly, hoping she would give me more than she had. I'm not really the whimsical type. Sure, things happen for a reason which is unbeknownst to us at that specific time, but I also believe that by the choices we make, we alter our path and make it how we want it to be. So we're in complete control of our own destinies? I wouldn't use that word, but yeah. We make choices and it takes us where we decide to go, Jenna replied. What if we don't have control? And that was how I was feeling at the moment. Completely out of control. Like some godlike being was toying with me. First bringing crazy Katie into my orbit in an attempt to destroy me, then the only woman I've ever loved to do who knew what. Jenna frowned. Life can't just run away with a person. You're always in a position to take the reins if it's taking you somewhere you don't want to go. I didn't know what to say to that, so I gazed out in front of me. Are you sure everything is okay? Jenna asked again. Do you believe in second chances? I asked. She scrunched up her face. It depends on the situation, really. If someone screwed me over, I wouldn't bother giving him a second chance. That sounded pretty brutal. How come? Because people rarely change their ways. We're conditioned to return to our default settings, the way we were raised. I damn well hope not. I glanced up at her, a little surprised by how black and white Jenna was being about this topic. So people can't change? I guess they can, if they want to. But they have to really want to change, and I've never come across anyone who's done it successfully, Jenna muttered. You've met some shitty people in your life, I pointed out. Yes, I have. I gave her a half smile. I'm sorry to hear that. It's not your fault, she shrugged. I had one more question, and in light of the Katie catastrophe, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Do you think I'm a good person, Jenna? Jenna tilted her head and red hair fell over her shoulder. You seem okay, I guess. I don't really know you outside of work. But you believe in people, and you give them what they're owed. My eyebrows rose on my forehead, and I stared at the prickly receptionist who guarded our front desk. That's probably the nicest thing you've ever said to me, I pointed out. Where's all this insecurity coming from? She asked, stepping closer to my desk. I don't know. I guess it's just everything. Katie and the case, the press. It's getting to me. She's making me out to be this terrible person who harassed her at work, made inappropriate comments about her body, and what I wanted to do with her. I guess I needed someone to say they don't believe I'm the monster some people think I am. Well, Jenna said and shot a quick glance out the window, there aren't protesters outside the building demanding your arrest, so I think you're still fine. That's oddly comforting, I sighed. I do what I can, she shrugged. But you know, Mr. Ross, you shouldn't allow people to make you feel inadequate and unsure of who you are. You've always been a decent guy, treated people with respect, so if you need me to testify for you, be a character witness, I'll do it. You never laid a finger on me, or ever made me feel anything but comfortable. That means a lot to me. I mean it, Mr. Ross. You don't deserve to go through this because she fucked up. I nodded silently and watched as Jenna turned to the door. I'll let you eat your lunch in peace and hold all your calls. Thank you. Anytime, Mr. Ross. Jenna left my office and I glanced down at my lunch, not even remotely hungry anymore. Hearing Jenna say those things to me was comforting, but as Eric had said, things were going to get worse before they got better. It was only a matter of time until that happened. I forced myself to eat, and while I did, I contemplated calling Cass. I wanted to know how her interview went from her perspective and congratulate her on getting the job. Despite everything that had happened in the past, I was proud of her for nailing the interview and even giving Eric a breakthrough in his case. She was made for a career in law. She had the kind of mind that would thrive in an environment like that. She analyzed a situation from so many different angles it made my head spin, which was probably why she was still upset with me. She kept mulling things over in her mind until it drove her crazy. I lowered my gaze, seeing the corner of her resume peek out from under the files stacked on my desk. Considering that a sign, I reached for my phone and retrieved the sheet of paper. I dialed her number and waited while it rang, anxiously tapping my fingers on my desk. Hello? My stomach tightened at the sound of her strong, sweet voice. Hey, it's Liam. There was a moment's pause, and I wondered for a second if she was going to hang up on me. Hey. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to hear from you. I know I shouldn't be calling you, but I wanted to know how your interview went. Oh, it went great. Mr. Hartman is a really nice guy. He's so smart, she said. But I guess you already knew that, right? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I did. We've been friends for years. That's great, she said simply. He was impressed with my resume, and he asked my advice about a case he was handling, and in the end, I got the job. Mr. Hartman even gave me a signing bonus, which I honestly didn't expect. I'm really happy for you, Cassidy, I told her. She deserved all the good fortune and happiness in the world, especially after everything she'd been through, mostly because of me. So am I, she agreed, and there was a pause at her end. Listen, I appreciate what you did for me. If it wasn't for you, then I would still be unemployed. You aced that interview all on your own. I can take care of myself, you know. Her tone had an accusatory edge to it, and I wanted to reassure her straight away. I know that, but we both know you needed my help, so a thank you is in order. Thank you. No, that's not what I mean, I said, bravely pushing forward with my plan. Hopefully she wouldn't hang up on me. What do you want from me, Liam? She asked. Dinner so that we can celebrate your new job. And so I can get to know you again. As you are now. I can't. Damn it. If it's a money thing. No, it's not. It's an I don't think it's a good idea thing. I understood that, but still didn't want to go along with it. Cassidy was the only woman I'd ever trusted, ever really loved. She was the one that I'd let get away, although I'd been the one to leave. And damn it, I'd regretted it since. Why not? We're both adults. We can have a civilized conversation with dinner. Can't we? Another pause. I suppose. Tonight then. At 7. I'll pick you up. You don't know where I live, she pointed out. But then again, you still have my resume, which was how you got my number, isn't it? A grin stretched across my face. You're going to be an amazing lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, Liam. You should be. Pick me up at 7, my house. I glanced at the resume and jotted down the address. It's a date. It's not okay. I'll see you at 7. I disconnected the call and placed my phone on the desk in front of me, grinning like a stupid teenager. I hadn't been on a date in a long time, and the nervous tension began to shiver along my skin. I turned in my chair and glanced out the window, lost in the feeling of dread that had surfaced. Had I crossed the line or not? I probably had. It's not a date, I muttered to myself. You're going on a date. I whirled around in my chair and stared wide-eyed at Jenna. When did you come in? Just a second ago, she answered and cocked her head. By the way, if you have to convince yourself that it's not a date, then it probably is. I straightened my shoulders and adjusted my suit jacket, although it was perfect to start off with. It's not a date, I still defended. Who's it with? She asked. I narrowed my eyes at her. I didn't have to tell her anything. She crossed her arms over her chest. I'm not leaving until you tell me. I sighed, believing her. It's with someone I used to know, a long time ago. Right? An old girlfriend? She asked. I paused for a moment, then stated again, it's not a date. Jenna chuckled and shook her head. Whatever you say, she scoffed and turned away. She reached the door and glanced over her shoulder again. Wear that dark gray shirt of yours. It really brings out your eyes. Before I could say anything, Jenna winked at me and left my office without another word. She was right, about a few things actually. My dark gray shirt did look good. Cass had also said it wasn't a date, so I was just going to pretend it wasn't. I didn't want to put unnecessary pressure on her, or make her feel uncomfortable. I didn't even want to try and show her that I was a good guy, because nothing I did would sway her opinion. I just wanted to have dinner with her, and celebrate her new paralegal position at Eric's firm. After I arrived home, I took a quick shower. Afterwards, I wrapped a towel around my waist and stared intently in the mirror. It had been a while since I'd shaved my face completely. Usually, I only trimmed my stubble, because as soon as shaved, I looked like a teenager again. The curse of a baby face. I didn't want to shave and bring back all the memories from Crested Butte and hurt Cass even more, so I decided to leave it. I got dressed wearing my dark gray shirt with a pair of tailored black trousers. I quickly styled my hair, brushed my teeth, and applied my cologne. A smile tugged at my mouth as I was reminded of prom night, when I'd spent almost an hour getting ready. I'd wanted to look perfect for her, and I remember my dad having to fix my tie a million times before I left the house. I'd felt so nervous I thought I was going to vomit. It had been strange for me to feel that high-strung, as Cass and I had dated for several months already, but that night was destined to be different. It had been the first night of a new stage in our lives. We'd planned on having sex for the first time, and we did, as cliché as it was. It wasn't in a hotel room or at an after-party at someone's house. I parked my father's truck at the end of Journey's End Road, tucked up into the tall pines that gave us privacy. And with an inflatable mattress in the back, pillows and blankets, we spent the night under the stars. It was pretty incredible, and a night I never forgot. I wondered if Cass still thought about that night, whether she still dreamt about the clear sky above us, or if she had scrubbed that whole episode from her mind because of what I did to her only a few weeks later. If only I could explain myself to her, tell her why I had done it. If only she'd listened to me. I wished she knew that even though I left, it didn't mean that I'd wanted to or was happy about it.
Chapter 5. Cassidy. What the hell am I doing? Here I was, standing outside my house with a flurry of butterflies whirling around my stomach. 6 feet away stood Liam, wearing a dark gray shirt that made him look totally amazing, even more than I thought possible. I stood frozen on the bottom step. Maybe he'll think I'm completely insane and leave me the hell alone. Maybe he already did, but judging by the way his eyes were fixed on me, he didn't really care. Hey, he broke the silence. You're early. Yet, you're ready to go. True. Unfortunately. I bit my bottom lip and stepped down onto the sidewalk, which led directly to him. Nice car, I said. It wasn't a lie. His luxury sedan was also sporty and sleek. I figured making small talk about his car would make it less obvious I was uncomfortable. I shouldn't be, but I was. This wasn't just a dinner between friends. Liam and I had history. A long and complex history that had ended so abruptly it still hurt when I thought about it. Yet, standing in front of him right now, all of those bad feelings just dissipated. Thanks. I've been meaning to get a new one. I scoffed at his feeble attempt at being modest, but noticed he wore an amused expression on his face. I was kidding, he confirmed. Right, I nodded. It really is nice. He opened the car door for me and I climbed in. Better than my dad's truck. He grinned coyly at me, his green eyes sparkling. My defenses gave in, and I said without thinking, nothing could ever be better than that truck. Liam lingered for a few moments before closing the door, then slowly made his way around the car. He slid effortlessly into the driver's seat, and as I glanced at him sitting beside me behind the wheel, flashes of our past appeared before my eyes. Driving in his dad's truck, singing to pop music and laughing, happier times we had shared. Our biggest argument had been in that truck too, only a few days before he left. I turned away, glancing out the window as my chest tightened, feeling like a dagger had been lodged into my ribs. Without a word, Liam started the engine and drove off. I wasn't sure where we were going, but I didn't really mind. Knowing Liam, it would be somewhere beautiful, as he had a knack for always finding something special anywhere he went. He used to steal my camera when I wasn't looking, and take the most gorgeous photographs. Light reflection off the snow, a sunset where it looked as though the sun had set fire to the sky. A simple photograph of me throwing a snowball at him looked like a piece of art. My eyes teared up, but I refused to allow the memories to make me long for the Liam I used to know. The Liam I'd loved, the Liam who'd hurt me. It was in the past, and even if I allowed him back in my life, he would never have my heart again. I wouldn't survive the pain of losing him twice. Liam parked the car and I glanced out the window. Where were we? Once I got my bearings, I realized he'd brought me to an amazing local restaurant that had a fairy tale dining room that paid tribute to the storied romance between a winemaker's daughter and a local lumberjack. It was romantic and cozy, but it also had a bit of a party vibe based on its location. I'd always wanted to try it out, but it didn't quite fit my budget. Once we were seated, I looked around, taking in the amazing decor. I was in no hurry to give Liam my undivided attention. It was kind of strange being out with him after all these years. "You're awfully quiet," he said as soon as the waiter left our table after taking our drink order. "I just have a lot on my mind," I admitted vaguely. "Is this weird for you?" he asked. "Yes, it is." "Is it weird for you?" "Very," he admitted. I sighed a breath of relief, and we chuckled together. Liam met my gaze, and for the first time I saw the vulnerability in his eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd actually agree to dinner." "Neither was I." "Why did you?" he asked. I hesitated, not sure how much of the truth I really wanted to share. But luckily for me, the waiter approached the table with our drinks. I accepted the glass of wine from him, and once I'd take a few large sips, I handed it back to the astounded waiter. "I'm going to need another one of those." "Right away, ma'am." Liam glanced at me, jaw dropped. "What?" I asked. Hadn't he seen someone drain a glass of wine in 3 seconds before? The corner of his mouth curled up and he chuckled. "Nothing. As I said, I have a lot on my mind." "Will you tell me about it?" "Trust me, you don't want to hear about my problems." He leaned forward. "But I do. Come on." I really didn't want to get into my woes about Nathan and finances. It was a depressing topic, and even if this wasn't an official date, I didn't want to kill the mood too quickly. "First, tell me about you." "You know everything about me," he answered. "Up until 10 years ago, or at least I thought I did." I shrugged. "How's your mom?" he asked suddenly, and all the breath went out of me. That dagger I'd been worried about, the one permanently lodged in my chest. Liam had just unknowingly gripped the handle and twisted. "She died," I answered, and his face dropped. "Oh my God, Cass. I'm so sorry. What happened?" "She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, stage 4, really aggressive," I told him. "She died about 9 months ago. I couldn't let Nathan live in that house by himself. So I went back to get him, we sold the family home and we moved out here. I managed to buy us a small house outside of the city, and Nathan took the move better than I thought he would. He's always been so strong, even when he was a kid. He's 22 already. Can you believe that?" "And how is he?" "He's as well as can be expected under the circumstances." "What does that mean?" I hated telling people this story. I told it too many times already. But unlike everyone else, Liam actually knew Nathan. Or he had when he was a kid. He was in an accident a few months ago. It was really bad. He's still in the hospital. He fractured his spine, and he'll need to have a few more surgeries before the doctor can say whether he'll be able to walk again. "We're optimistic, you know," I said, not sure who I was trying to reassure more, Liam or myself. Liam's eyes were big and round. "Cass, I had no idea you were going through all of this. Why didn't you tell me?" I stared at him like he was crazy, and actually looked away when I answered. What was he talking about? We hadn't spoken in 10 years. Why would I tell him about the intimate details of my life during a job interview? I just did. I couldn't exactly tell you on the phone or at my interview, could I? I narrowed my gaze at him. "I haven't seen you in 10 years. I wasn't going to blurt out all my problems the first time I saw you again." "Why not?" I TSSKD at him this time. "Seriously?" "Because knowing you, you'd want to act gallant and try to save me." And he would, he had. Even with him leaving me and never calling, I knew he'd always do the right thing if faced with a problem. "Ah, I can take care of myself," I defended. "I don't doubt that for a second." The waiter returned with my glass of wine and took our dinner orders. I picked up the glass, staring at the burgundy contents. "I'm not here to argue with you. No. We're here celebrating the fact that you landed yourself a killer job at a successful firm, and your future is a whole lot brighter now. Not to mention you have a way above average salary," he said. "The fact that you know all this is very unsettling." He chuckled and his eyes sparkled brightly, luring me in. "Eric is a friend. You needed a job, he needed a paralegal. Are you going to talk to him about this?" I asked and motioned to the open space between us. Liam's gaze was suddenly darkened, troubled. "My personal life is personal, so no. I won't be discussing you with anyone." "Fair enough," I nodded. "So tell me, why'd you move here? To Denver?" "I needed a change of scenery after Duke. North Carolina was beautiful, but something was missing. My heart just wasn't there anymore." He lowered his gaze. "Maybe it was never there to begin with." "You went to Duke just like you wanted," I said, struggling to keep the pride out of my voice. I remembered how excited he'd been the day he received his acceptance letter in the mail. "Yeah. After college, I decided to move back west. I wasn't sure where, but then I applied for a job here, and I got it. So I packed up all my stuff and moved. 8 years later, here we are. Uncomfortable as fuck, right?" A laugh burst through my throat as I said, "Absolutely. Why do you think that is?" I sighed and leaned back against the chair. "You know exactly why, Liam. We haven't talked in over 10 years. The way we left things was ridiculous, and we're not the same kids we used to be." I beg to differ. "Of course you would." I rolled my eyes at him. "You're still as beautiful as you were the first time I saw you," he said suddenly, and my heart leapt in my chest. But the reality of the situation came in and cooled my cheeks. "You're not allowed to say things like that, Liam." "Why not? Don't you think I've been quiet for long enough?" "Yeah, I did. But a decade was past the point of no return." "You shouldn't have been quiet in the first place," I retorted and took a sip of my wine. He didn't have anything to say after that, so we ate our meal in silence and left the restaurant a short while later. I had a burning pain in my chest as I walked to the car, but I couldn't make it all the way there. I simply stood against the bricks of one of the nearby shops, staring at the ground. "Cass," Liam's voice broke through the pain in my heart and I glanced up at him. "Please take a walk with me." "Where to?" "Just down the sidewalk. I think we should talk." "Oh, really? Now you want to talk?" "We spent the last 15 minutes in complete silence and now you want to talk," I said bitterly and crossed my arms. "Please." "Fine," I agreed and set off down the sidewalk of the hip Baker area with him. He led me down some steps to a small sunken parklet that had paths lined with benches and trees strung with white lights. I was grateful I wasn't wearing a tight skirt this time, because frankly, I'd had enough of stairs to last me a lifetime, which reminded me of something I wanted to ask Liam. "I have a question," I said as we reached the bottom of the steps and Liam turned to me. "This should be interesting," he chuckled. "How do you manage those steps in front of your building every day?" "I nearly died the first time I was there," I asked. "I've never walked up those steps," he answered with a grin. I frowned at him, demanding an explanation. "There's a side entrance to the building from inside the parking garage." I threw my hands up in the air. "Oh my God. Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Only staff is permitted to use that entrance. They get a special parking pass." I narrowed my eyes. He motioned to follow him, and I did, slowly walking beside him as we made our way along the path. There were a few people in the park, but walking beside Liam made me feel like we were the only two people in the world. I knew I shouldn't be thinking things like that, but being here with him dug up all my old feelings for him. Somehow it didn't matter if he hurt me, the past felt so long ago now. But I knew better than that. Well, my head knew better than that. My heart was still hoping that this man I'd loved for so long would be the one for me. "Do you like it here in Denver?" he asked. "It's nice, I suppose. I like it here, but sometimes I miss the wide open spaces, knowing everyone in town." I sighed. To be honest, I'm still not used to the city life. I've always been a small town girl. Liam smiled as he thrust his hands into his trouser pockets. That's the best kind anyway. Women in the city are ferocious and pretty tenacious when it comes to getting what they want. Give me a small town girl any day. His lips grimaced, as though he were saying that those women were unpleasant. I don't believe they're all that bad. You've been here long enough. You probably have women lining up to date you, I chuckled. Liam scoffed and shook his head, and it was clear something was weighing on his mind. Yeah, women just love someone who has a pending lawsuit for sexual harassment. My chest tightened with worry. Do you want to talk about it? I asked. God, no. I don't want to disgust you, he sighed. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Like what? We were supposed to be celebrating your new job, but it's being screwed up by all the shit I'm going through at the moment. I could feel Liam's frustration, and it was authentic. This isn't a screw-up. I'm still here even though I'm not quite sure why. Liam glanced down at me and stared for a while as though considering my words. We walked along the path in silence for a few seconds, then his hand brushed against mine. I was pretty sure it was by accident, but my body responded in a way that it hadn't TP anyone in a very long time. Liam's presence, his voice, everything about him called out to me so loudly I couldn't deny it. My head was screaming at me to ignore the silly feelings, but it was hopeless. My entire body was alive with him by my side. His hand touched mine again, and this time it wasn't by accident. I turned to look at him and he gazed down at me, his eyes sparkling. Moments we'd spent together flashed through my mind, and it made me even more confused. Thunder rumbled in the distance and then lightning crashed across the sky, which made both of us jump. Liam glanced up at the threatening sky. We have to go. I jumped again, not hearing him properly. What? We have to go. There's a storm coming, he pointed to the sky. Okay. We took a few steps in the direction of the car, and rain began pouring from the heavens. I let out a squeal as goosebumps rose all over my skin, and we made a run for it through the park. My hair was slicked to my head and I was shivering cold. Quick, follow me. Liam grabbed my hand and tugged me towards the closest place with shelter. It was a small boutique hotel, a few blocks from our car. Oh my God, that came on us quickly. I laughed as I stared down at my outfit. We were soaked from head to toe, and as I met Liam's gaze, we began laughing like a couple of school kids. I glanced back at the park, which I could barely see through the sheets of water falling from the sky. The rain was coming down in bucket loads. I turned to Liam. It looks like we might be here a while. You want to get a room? I froze. Was he serious? The audacity he had to think that I would get a hotel room with him. I couldn't even believe he'd suggested it. It was absurd. And yet here we stood, having been given a second chance. How could I say no to this? So despite my misgivings, I found myself nodding. Sure. What did I have to lose?
Chapter 6. Liam. It was a long shot, of course, and part of me was joking. But when she actually agreed, it shocked me into another dimension. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood at the front desk, handing my credit card to the young man on duty. The guy handed my card back to me and retrieved the key card behind him. He placed it on the counter and slid it towards me. Room 7. Thank you. I pocketed the card and turned to Cass, who stood by the door, looking at the rain falling outside. Cass? She glanced over her shoulder, then turned to me. She didn't say anything, but the atmosphere around us was electric with expectation. She followed me down the long corridor leading to the staircase, and I heard her laughing. Stairs everywhere, I joked, which made her laugh even more. We found our room quickly, and as we stepped inside, I was pleasantly surprised. The inside of the room was well lit, with a large window overlooking historic Broadway. The king bed was covered in an unusually luxurious comforter, and plush, puffy pillows were stacked against the headboard 2 deep. There was a small seating area with a love seat and coffee table, and a television mounted against the wall. Understated elegance was the theme, apparently. This is nice, Cass whispered and turned to me. Who would have known it? I dug my hands onto my pockets and glanced at her. What? She asked. Do you remember the night we were caught in that snowstorm at Adam's uncle's cabin in the mountains? I asked. Of course. We were there for almost 4 days. I thought we were going to die for sure, she answered. That's a little dramatic, I chuckled. Besides, I wouldn't have let that happen. She was walking around the room now, glancing at the features as though she was interested, but I could feel her attention pinpointed on me. We got pretty close those 4 days, didn't we? She asked softly. We did. The room filled with silence as our emotions permeated the air around us. Neither of us had the words to break through the strained atmosphere. It had to be me. I was the one in the wrong. I took a deep breath and said, I get that you're mad at me for leaving all those years ago, Cass, and I wouldn't blame you for that. I'm not mad, okay? I'm hurt. There's a difference. That's worse, I muttered. It was like saying she was disappointed. There was so much more pain in the words. I was hurt when you left without even telling me why or saying goodbye, she said. I'm still hurt. And I hated that. How did I make her understand? I never wanted to hurt you or cause you pain or make you cry. At the time I thought it was the best thing to do for us both. She turned to glare at me. That's a lie, and we both know it. Something happened that made you leave, and you were too afraid to tell me. You still are. Cass knew me too well. You're right. I was scared. I was a coward, Cass. She held up her hand. Just stop, okay? No, it's true. I loved you and I left you. Why couldn't she believe the truth? She turned on me with her eyes flaring wildly. That's bullshit. You wouldn't have left if you really loved me. I didn't have a choice, Cass. You always have a choice. You chose to leave, she snarled. And don't call me that. You have no right, after everything you put me through. I wasn't sure whether it was rage, passion, or a mix of both that caused me to storm forward, grab Cass's waist and pull her close to me. I had to make her understand. She angrily grabbed onto my shoulders as though she was going to shake me. I froze as her fingers dug into my flesh, thinking she was going to push me away, but she didn't. Instead, her hands wrapped around my arms and she kissed me back, igniting my entire body. Her lips were sweet, the warmth of her body making me ache for all the time we spent apart. Our kiss turned savage, all the anger and frustration from the last 10 years had taken us over and turned into unbridled passion. My body temperature soared as my lips traveled down her neck, her ragged breathing caressing my ear and her fingers raking through my hair. I pressed her up against the wall, hearing something crash down onto the ground, but I didn't care what it was. My heart nearly burst. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I couldn't hide from the truth anymore. I was still in love with her. Not even 10 years without her could change it. Truth be told, Cass had always been with me in my heart. She caught my gaze and cocked her head. Everything okay? I nodded. Everything's perfect. A slow smile formed on her lips as she quietly nodded in agreement, grabbing the sheet and covering herself. Oh, now you're shy, I joked. My stomach tightened when she gave me a half-hearted smile. I wanted to ask what was wrong, what was going on in her mind, but I didn't. Mostly because I didn't want to know the answer. So instead, I relished the silence, albeit awkward, by just being with her. I lay still and the moments ticked on, the atmosphere getting colder and staler. Not even our first time in the back of my dad's truck had been this awkward afterward. It had been awkward, don't get me wrong. Most first times are, but this was different. It was as if the post-orgasmic high had ended too soon, and now we were faced with the reality of the situation. The rain stopped, she pointed out quietly. I nodded. That was one way to break the silence, I supposed. I should probably take you home. I sat upright and slid off the bed. Yeah? We got dressed in silence, somehow avoiding eye contact with one another altogether, which made me uneasy. Was she ashamed? The ride home was just as bad. We didn't speak at all, and she spent most of the drive staring out the window. I was worried. Mostly about what she was thinking. Cass had always been ruled by her head. It made her intelligent, but it also meant that she liked to be in control of every situation. She wasn't one to take a risk, and what we had done was definitely not calculated or planned in any way. The radio played softly in the background, and as fate would have it, or whatever twisted force ruled the world, our favorite song when we were together started to play on the radio. I noticed her shoulders relax, but as I opened my mouth to say something, she immediately tensed again. It'd be better if I didn't say anything, I knew. If I did say something, I would fuck everything up completely, and perhaps for good. Plus, it appeared she was close to tears. I may not have been a part of her life for 10 years, but I still knew all her facial expressions, including the one where she was about to cry. The song ended as we pulled into Cass's street, and I stopped my car by the curb right in front of her house. Cass? Thank you for tonight, she said as she undid her seatbelt. You're welcome, I said, not wanting to push the conversation past her comfort zone. Judging by the expression on her face, she was way beyond the limits of being comfortable. She opened the car door and glanced back at me for a moment. I held her gaze, not saying a word. Then her shoulders fell, and a sigh escaped her lips as she climbed out of the car. She muttered, "Good night, Liam," before slamming the door. Fuck. I watched her walk up the steps in front of her house and go inside, all the while scolding myself for being such an idiot. You should have said something, anything. I drove away, sadness dragging at my spirit. Maybe this was the way it was supposed to work out. Who knew?
Chapter 7. Cassidy. A few days after my roll in the hay with Liam, it was my first day at my new job. I blinked open my eyes and a beam of sunlight flashed directly onto my face, blurring my already hazy vision. I groaned as I rolled over, the familiar softness of my sheets wrapping around me. I stared at the clock beside my bed and sighed. It was 2 minutes before my alarm was supposed to go off. Damn it. I sat up in bed and images of my time with Liam flooded into my head, along with a huge wave of sadness. It had been one of the greatest nights of my life, but also one of the worst. And more importantly, it had been a mistake. Sure, it had been amazing and spontaneous, and if it wasn't for Liam being Liam, I would have gone my whole life without a memory like it. But it was still a mistake. I sighed and slid back down beneath the warmth of my covers. I couldn't believe that Liam had nothing to say to me in the car while our favorite song had played on the radio. Or even when he dropped me off. No words, no explanation. Nothing. As usual. And for 2 days following, he hadn't called me either. I only had myself to blame if I'd thought he could change. I glanced at the outfit I'd hung on my closet handle. I couldn't put it off anymore. Okay, get up. I climbed out of bed, made myself a cup of coffee, and glanced at my phone. There were no messages or calls from Liam. Still. Disappointment hit me like a punch to the gut, and I groaned aloud. Stop being so pathetic. Maybe he'll call today? Isn't the rule for guys to wait 3 days before calling? I shook myself to clear the thoughts. I had bigger fish to fry today. Today was my first day at Hartman & Cole, and I was determined to have a great day. I also had to swing by the hospital to make a payment. Mr. Hartman's signing bonus had been more than generous, and would definitely cover the next few months. I'd almost burst into tears when he told me that. And even better than that, after signing the contract 3 days ago, the balance was already reflected in my bank account. I was truly grateful and I had no words to properly express it, so I figured the best way to show my gratitude was to work hard. Within the hour I was dressed in a chic outfit, my hair swept to the side, and despite everything that had happened, I was feeling confident. I drove to the hospital and walked along the corridor until I found the billings office. Good morning, ma'am. May I help you? The young woman greeted me with a warm smile. Morning, I greeted in return and took out my wallet. I'm here to make a payment for the account of Nathan Moore. I'm his sister and responsible for the account. Of course, she answered and typed on her computer keyboard. She took my card from me, swiped it through the machine. The relief in my heart knowing I could pay this bill was overwhelming. It felt like a mountain had been lifted from my shoulders. There you go. Thank you. I left with a smile and made my way to Nathan's room. When I opened the door, I saw the doctor standing beside Nathan's bed. Hey Cassie, Nathan said with a welcoming smile. You look nice. I winked at him and approached the doctor. Good morning, Dr. Andrews. Good morning, Cassidy. How is everything going? I asked. Look, Nathan said excitedly and pointed to his feet. As soon as I saw the wiggling of his toes, I stopped abruptly and bit my bottom lip. Oh my God. Yeah, pretty impressive, right? He grinned proudly. Doctor, is this normal? I mean, I'm not complaining or anything. I just didn't expect him to be able to do something like that so soon. Nathan is a strong-willed young man, the doctor answered as though that was the entire answer to this incredible puzzle. I couldn't help laughing. Don't I know it? Usually, with injuries as extensive as Nathan's, the prognosis is not very good, but he's exceeded our wildest expectations. The way things are currently progressing, and with the determination he has to get better, there may not be a need for another surgery. My eyebrows shot up. I could breathe again. I glanced at Nathan, who was still proudly wiggling his toes. A relieved tear ran down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I didn't want to ruin my makeup before I even got to work. That's the best news I've heard all month. Apart from you getting a job at a law firm, sis, Nathan pointed out. Dr. Andrews glanced at me and smiled. Congratulations, Cassidy. Thanks. Speaking of which, I have to get going or I'll be late my first day. We wouldn't want that, Nathan said with a touch of sarcasm. Thanks for stopping by, Cassidy, Dr. Andrews said. No, thank you for giving us such great news. The doctor glanced at my brother. It's Nathan you have to thank. He's the champion here. He is, isn't he? I glanced at my little brother and struggled against the tears once again. Sure, he was 22 years old, but he'd always been far wiser than all his peers. Nathan was the one who'd helped me move on with my life after Liam. So he wouldn't be too impressed with me if he knew what Liam and I did last night. My skin still tingled where Liam had touched me, and oddly, I had to stop myself from grinning like a stupid teenager whenever I thought about it. No. I couldn't let my brother know. He'd be furious. Nathan knew how much Liam's departure had affected me. He'd heard me crying in my room for too many nights to count. He knew how long it had taken me to get over everything that had happened, which was why I knew he'd want me to stay as far away from Liam Ross as humanly possible. But I couldn't. Cassie? Nathan's voice snapped me back to the present. Back to his hospital room, with Dr. Andrews staring at me strangely. Oh, sorry. Zoned out there for a minute. I'll be back later and I'll tell you all about my day, okay? Okay. Can you bring some pizza or Thai food? Nathan asked. I glanced at Dr. Andrews, who held his hands up in defeat. It's fine by me. Great, Nathan smiled happily and glanced expectantly at me. If my miracle brother wanted pizza, he could have pizza. Whatever you want, I said to him. I'll see you later. I left the hospital feeling lighter than I had in a very long time. Nathan's bills were current, he was getting better and most probably wouldn't require any more surgery. And on top of that, I had an amazing new job with an incredible salary. Everything was falling into place. The only piece of my new puzzle that I wasn't so sure about was Liam. Where did he fit in? We'd had sex, very passionate sex I might add. But where did that leave us? A better question would be, did I have the fortitude to allow him back into my life after everything? Was last night all it took for me to go back on all the promises I'd made myself? What if he left me again? I'd barely survived the first time, so I sure as hell wouldn't survive a second. Did he even want to be a part of my life again? So many questions and so few answers. Somehow Liam had weaseled his way back into my life and into my pants as well. As I climbed into my car and put my seatbelt on, my breath caught in my throat. I could still feel the pressure of his hands against my breasts as he thrust himself inside me over and over. Damn, that was hot. Shivers ran down my spine, and I glanced at myself in the mirror with a look of disapproval. No, Cassidy. Stop it. I had to focus. I couldn't be thinking pornographic thoughts on my first day of work. Especially not about Liam at his best friend's firm. That would be unprofessional, not to mention inappropriate. Not that anyone would know. I sighed as I started the car. This was already getting too complicated. The drive from the hospital to the office was brief, and I kept the window open for some fresh air to clear my head. At my new work, everyone was surprisingly friendly and helpful as I found my feet. Mr. Hartman, or Eric as I was told call him, was really nice, and he briefed me about many of their important cases at the moment. It was a lot to remember, but I didn't mind. This kind of high-stress, busy environment was what I had always desired. I loved it already. At lunchtime I took out my phone and texted Liam, even though I knew I shouldn't. I couldn't help it. I wanted to meet up with him. I had to talk about last night and what it meant for us, and what it meant to him. I used to understand Liam so well when we were younger. I knew how to read his physical cues, his eyes, and all the subtle hints on his face that most people missed. Now I was a little out of sorts. I didn't know what to expect, or what he was thinking anymore. "Boyfriend trouble, Cassidy?" Hannah, one of the paralegals, asked me as she sat down next to me. I glanced up from my phone and pursed my lips. "No, I was just texting a friend." "You were pretty zoned out while typing that message," she pointed out. "It's nothing," I shrugged, not wanting to explain my whole life story to a practical stranger. "How's your day so far? Not too much for you to handle?" Lennox, one of the managing partners, paralegal, asked. "No, quite the opposite, actually. It's exactly what I hoped it would be. My previous job was much less stimulating, and I was bored out of my mind. Plus, I loved business law in college, so this is right up my alley." "Eric said you were a UC Denver girl, top of your class." "That's impressive," Hannah pointed out. I glanced at Hannah, who was the same age as me, but so different in appearance. She had glossy black hair, olive skin, and high cheekbones. Her big brown eyes and pink lips reminded me of my Colombian roommate. I'd always envied her beautiful skin and features, and the way she had the college guys hanging on her every word. Hannah was also one of those girls, I could see it as clear as day. And the worst part was, I was totally envious of her as well. But there was one thing no one could take away from me, and that was graduating at the top of my class. "Thank you. Why didn't you just become a lawyer?" Lennox asked and glanced at me after taking a bite of her sandwich. "What kept you from law school?" Hannah also chimed in. I pursed my lips and lowered my gaze. I was going to go, but I took a deep breath and ran my fingers through my hair. My mom got sick and I had to go home. An awkward silence filled the air and Hannah said, "I'm so sorry." "It's okay. You didn't know." I glanced at everyone around the table. "None of you did, so stop feeling badly." "If your mom okay now?" Keith, another paralegal, asked. "Keith," Hannah muttered and gave him the side eye. "Sorry," Keith muttered. I cleared my throat and stood up. "I need to make a quick call." "Excuse me?" "No better time to call your ex-boyfriend whom you recently slept with than when you're already drowning in self-pity, right?" I dialed Liam's number and waited for him to answer. "Hey, it's Liam Ross. I'm not available right now. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Alternatively, call the office if it's urgent." After the beep, I said in a lowered tone, "Hey Liam? It's Cassidy. I was hoping you'd have replied to my text, but I guess you're busy with work. I'd really like to get together after work, if you can. Call me back, please. It's important." I ended the call and took a few deep breaths. Stop being such a girl. My imagination was off to the races, running wild with conclusions. All because he hadn't texted me back. I tried to find my calm. Did it really matter that he hadn't called back? Yes. There were 100 possible reasons why he wasn't answering his phone, and considering we'd slept together once, I really needed to calm down. My stupid brain considered calling his office for a moment, but I didn't want to seem desperate. So I focused on my next task and pushed Liam to the back of my mind. I was a pro at doing that. I'd been doing it for over a decade now. I went about my day, and even managed to leave my phone in my bag in the staff room so that I couldn't keep checking it. If he called, he could leave a message just like I had with him. The day passed quicker than I thought, and I was even complimented by Eric, who was impressed with my work, which meant a lot to me. After I picked up some Thai food for Nathan, I headed over to the hospital. I glanced at my phone every so often, but there was nothing. No phone call, no text, no message from Liam. It was after 6 when I stepped into Nathan's room, and my baby brother was looking very cheerful. I put on my brave face and told him all about my day. How much fun I had, how nice the people were, and how much I had already learned. Nathan was happy for me, and we had a good 2 hours together. Of course, I didn't mention Liam, because I knew how Nathan would react. I didn't know how long I could keep the truth from him, because I really didn't like keeping things from my brother. He was the only family I had left. But as his big sister, it was my duty to shift my personal problems aside and stay upbeat and positive for him. I could deal with Liam later. Right?
Chapter 8. Liam. 2 calls. 4 texts. And all without a single reply from me. That was what I had to deal with when I glanced at my phone the moment I stepped out of the courthouse. As if I didn't have enough to deal with today. It had been a long day, and I was exhausted. Seeing my ex-assistant Katie and her smug-as-shit lawyer from across the courtroom made me promise myself that I'd never hire a female assistant again. And by the end of the day, I was wondering why I'd want anything to do with a woman again. So seeing all of Cass's texts and messages made me uneasy. I didn't want everything with her to blow up in my face too. Liam? I heard Morgan call my name and I lowered my phone. Morgan's straight posture spoke of a confidence I lacked. Katie's lawyer had been ruthless in his statement, and even though I was told not to say a single word to him during the hearing, it had been extremely hard to keep quiet against such slander. "Are you okay?" Morgan asked. It was pretty brutal in there. "Yeah, I'm fine." Morgan Cole had been my lawyer for a long time now. I was introduced to him via Eric. Morgan and Eric were partners in their law firm, and Eric had suggested I hire Morgan to represent me. I understood, as Eric and I were friends, and we didn't want a conflict of interest on our hands. Morgan was a great attorney, and although I was taking a battering at the moment, I had great hopes that we would come out on top, with my integrity and reputation intact. "Listen, Liam. I know you're frustrated right now, and I can understand that, but the trial may go on for 3 days, so you have to hold out for a little longer." "I know. And you can't see her until all of this is over. You know that too," Morgan warned. "I know. Even if it means losing the only woman I ever wanted. If Katie's lawyer finds out about this." "I know. What the fuck else did he want from me?" I glanced back to my phone and tried to calm down. I told Morgan about what happened with Cassidy, obviously not in too much detail, but I had to tell him. I didn't want him to get any surprises from the opposite counsel, because I'd withheld information. He needed to know everything, which was why he advised me to stay away from Cass until everything was over. For her own safety and mine. Why was a hell of a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Katie's lawyer didn't need any more ammunition against me than he already allegedly had. Not only was my reputation on the line, but my credibility and my career as well. Losing a sexual harassment case would not do me any favors, especially with the company I worked for. I could lose my job if I was found guilty, which I wasn't, but no one would care about my side of the story once the judge had decided for me. Few other companies in the city would hire me with a record like that. I'd spent the last few months thinking over every little detail of the case. I tried to think back to any moment I'd spent with Katie, all our interactions, trying to figure out if there was something, anything that I'd done that would make me guilty. I knew guys that took advantage of women, bad guys. But that just wasn't me. You could call me a workaholic, lazy around the house and emotionally cold. But not this. I respected the women I worked with, and would never put any of them in a situation where they felt uncomfortable or disrespected. But my word wasn't enough, clearly. It didn't matter if I was a respected expert in my field, who'd never taken a wrong step. People tended to forget about all the good things you've done in your life, and they loved gossip. Still, I wasn't going to let her win. I couldn't. I understood why Morgan advised me to keep my distance from Cass. After all, she was an employee at Morgan and Eric's firm. The firm that represented me. Hadn't thought that one through when I'd gotten her the job. I also didn't want Katie's lawyer to see us together and find out that we were. My thoughts stopped abruptly. What were we exactly? We'd slept together last night, but that was really all there was. And as much as I wanted to think that we had a future together, I also had to accept that it might not happen. It had been a spur-of-the-moment passion for us both. And it had left us with unexplained feelings and unanswered questions, all of which could not be ignored if there was any hope of us reconciling. Maybe I should explain to her that we needed to put our relationship on hold for a while. But there were issues with that. She'd think I only wanted to be with her on my terms, and that wasn't going to sit well with her. I couldn't afford to hurt her again, but I also couldn't provide her with a future if I didn't have one to offer. There was nothing else I could do. Not until the trial was over. I went home exhausted and frustrated. I heard my phone buzz a few times and groaned aloud. It was probably Cass, but I didn't have the strength to talk to her at that moment. I ran my hands over my face as I collapsed into my recliner. I wanted to talk to her, but I knew that I'd be curt with her and she didn't deserve that. My house was dark, as it always was. I dropped my keys down on the lamp table beside me, along with my phone and wallet. I need to get out of these clothes. I forced my tired body to stand and walk to my bedroom. I slipped off my jacket and my tie, draping them over the backrest of the couch as I moved past. Running my fingers through my hair, I let out a miserable sigh as my phone buzzed again. She didn't let up, did she? Guilt tightened my gut. Instead of answering, I ignored the messages and took a shower. I closed my eyes beneath the steaming hot water and hoped my troubles would wash down the drain. When I climbed out of the shower, I slid on a pair of comfortable track pants and a t-shirt. I reheated some leftovers that were in the fridge and grabbed a beer. Fuck knew I deserved it. Actually, I deserved a whole liquor store. I sat down on the recliner and ate my dinner, catching up on the sports news of the day. I'd always been a fan of basketball and football, ever since I was a kid watching it with my dad. Father-son bonding times happened on our old black couch in the living room. I missed the old man. Maybe I should call him tonight. I needed a bit of guidance, fatherly advice. I finished my beer and my dinner, then grabbed my phone. When I sat back down on the couch, I dialed my father's number. "Hey son," my dad's voice sounded over the phone. "Hey Dad. How are things going?" "Good, buddy. Your mom's planning a trip down to Denver at Christmas if that's okay," my dad said. "Of course, Dad. That'll be nice. It feels like forever since you guys came to visit." "It's not like we get invited or anything," my father joked. "You know you and Mom are always welcome." My father scoffed and said, "Oh, we wouldn't want to impose on your big city life." I rolled my eyes up to the ceiling and ran a hand through my hair. "It's not as glamorous as you think. I'd much rather be sitting on that black couch in your living room, drinking beer and watching football." "Is everything okay?" my father asked. "You sound off." I rubbed my eyes with my free hand. "There's been a lot of things happening." "Besides the lawsuit?" he asked, and my stomach tightened. I hated that my parents had to deal with the lie that I was some sort of sexual predator. "Yeah? Do you want to talk about it?" "Yep. I do. I saw Cassidy a few days ago." "Cassidy Moore?" The surprise in my father's voice was obvious. "Yes, that's her." For some reason I'd thought my dad would forget who Cass was, but then again, she was kind of unforgettable. "You haven't spoken about her in a while. How is she?" "She's great. She just got a job at Eric's firm as a paralegal. She's just as beautiful as the last time I saw her." "And? How'd it go seeing her again?" I shifted in my seat and shrugged my shoulders, even though my dad couldn't see me. My dad knew the complicated history with Cass and me, as well as the circumstances around how everything ended. He also knew how much it broke me, leaving her. It was strange. We talked, we went out to dinner downtown, then we took a walk. Everything felt exactly like it did before. It started to rain, so we ran for cover and ended up at a small hotel. "Liam." By the tone of my father's voice, he already knew exactly what had happened. "I know what you're thinking, Dad. It was most probably a mistake, a big one, but everything I felt for Cass is still there, and seeing her again made it come back even stronger." "So, what are you going to do about it?" My father's question took me by surprise, and I inhaled slowly, because I didn't know the answer to it. "Right now, I can't do anything about it. Morgan told me to keep my distance from her until the lawsuit's settled. I don't want people to think I'm a scumbag." My father scoffed and cleared his throat. "Does Cassidy know that you're doing this?" "Dad, I can't just tell her." He cut me off. "Liam, she deserves to know the truth." I groaned and put my head back against the headrest and looked up at the ceiling. She's going to think that I'm full of shit. And if you don't tell her, then you are, my father pointed out. I could see him sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of black coffee in his hand, dishing out wisdom like only he could give. He was one of the wisest people I knew, and not because he was my father. Even though he'd never tell me outright to do something, he'd always gently guide me into finding the right path. I gathered the courage to admit what I was really worried about. Either way, I'm screwed. Do you love her? I froze. Did I? A lot of time had passed between us, but yeah, I do. Does she know that? I paused for a moment too long. I'd always thought she knew how I felt, but from her reactions yesterday, I realized that was not the case. You should tell her, Liam. And if she still loves you, it won't matter if you're going through a tough time, have a lawsuit against you, or anything like that. That's the best thing about love. It's not conditional of circumstances. I closed my eyes. Thanks, Dad. You're welcome, buddy. Tell Mom I send my love. Of course. She's at Rhonda's next door. I'll give her the message. Thanks, Dad. I can't wait to see you guys. I really miss you. We miss you too, son. Keep your head up, okay? I'll try my best, Dad. Bye. I lowered the phone as soon as I heard the call disconnect, and a wave of nostalgia crashed over me. I really missed my parents. They were only a few hundred miles away, but it sucked that I couldn't see them as often as I liked because I was so busy with work. I hated to think of them all alone in their house in Crested Butte, the same house I grew up in, the same house Cass and I spent many afternoons and nights in. At times I wondered what my life would have been like if I had stayed in there. Would Cass and I have gotten married, had a family? Would we have still lived there, or would we have settled somewhere else? Would we have split anyway since our dreams were too far apart? A sudden banging on my front door sent me back to reality. I jumped up from the couch and walked to the front door. I opened it slowly, not sure what to expect on the other side of the door. Cass? How'd you find me? You're listed. Cass stood in front of me, her blue eyes wild and angry. I immediately stepped to the side, allowing her to enter, but she just stood there, her breathing a little strained. Do you want to come in? She pushed past me and I closed the door. This was going to be interesting. I followed her to the living room and she whirled around. What the hell is going on with you, Liam? What do you mean? I asked. You know exactly what I mean, you asshole. You practically begged me to give you a second chance, and stupidly I did. We have a great night, you fuck me at the hotel, then ignore my calls and messages all day. Do you know how fucked up that is? She was panting for breath, and if she'd been a cartoon, smoke would have been billowing out of her ears. Wait, Cass, I said, holding my hands up in defense. If you let me explain. Was last night a mistake, she exclaimed. It's not like that, I muttered as I stepped away from her. Then what is it like, Liam? She asked, but I still couldn't look at her. I spent the entire day trying to call you. I messaged you that I wanted to talk and that it was urgent, yet you still ignored me. Cass? Do I mean so little to you that you think you can just use me like that? Don't put it like that. Cass, I didn't use you. It sure as hell feels like it. If it was such a big mistake, why didn't you just say so yesterday? Why didn't you stop before things went as far as they did? She asked. The room went quiet, and I slowly turned to her. You mean a lot more to me than you think you do, Cass. The fight seemed to go out of her as her shoulders slumped. Then why the silence? I had to lie to my brother as to why I was constantly checking my phone, she told me. I don't lie to my brother, Liam. I know. Then what the fuck? She repeated in frustration. I thought about you every single moment of the day. It was the truth. Cass raised an apprehensive eyebrow at me and crossed her arms. Oh, really? I was going to have to come clean, and that meant spilling the truth about everything.
Chapter 9. Cassidy. I was so angry I was digging my nails into the soft flesh of my palms. I wanted to scream, throw things, curse up a storm. And the way Liam kept glancing at me, with his gentle eyes and sad frown, wasn't doing me any favors. Focus, Cassidy. Yes, really, he said with a nod. I was in court all day today. Guilt instantly sliced through my belly. Here I was, throwing a tantrum because he wasn't calling me back when he literally couldn't. Shame on me. Liam, I'm so sorry, I stuttered. I didn't know. How'd it go? It was only the first day, but it got pretty rough. It's shit when people try to dig up every shred of dirt they can on you, trying their hardest to discredit me and ruin my reputation. I'm so sorry, I whispered. I wanted to cry. After such a whirlwind day focused solely on my feelings, I'd believed all the bullshit my paranoid brain had thrown at me. That's why I didn't call you back. I had to focus my energy on the case, saying the right things, behaving the right way. Today was one of the worst days of my life, if I'm honest. My shoulders slumped as I approached him. I didn't know what to say to him, but at that moment, words were not what was needed. I placed my hands on his shoulders and pulled him close. It took a few seconds for him to hug me back, but as he lowered his hand onto my shoulder, I could feel the pain he was in. I knew how that felt, to be defeated. Bereft. I'd experienced it myself more than once. After he'd left me, after my mom had died, after Nathan's accident, after all the bills piled up. All the bad things that had happened to me began when Liam had left. When he hadn't been part of my world, and it made me wonder, was he the key to my life? The integral part that I needed to function? It seemed pathetic that I needed a man in my life to be happy and successful. I would never admit that thought to anyone, especially not to him, but maybe it was partly true. I didn't know. What I did know was that I needed him, more than I'd ever admitted to myself, but there was a part still holding me back. The uncertainty of what had made him leave so suddenly 10 years ago. I still didn't know why things had gone down that way. Hopefully he'd clear it all up, and soon. His fingers raked softly and slowly through my hair, sending waves of desire flowing through me one after the other. Goosebumps covered every inch of my body, and his muscles relaxed beneath my hands. This was what I could be for him, and him for me. A safe place, somewhere I could hide away from the world when things got too much to bear. And I could be that for him. We used to be that for each other. I would seek refuge at his house when my mother's stupid boyfriend would visit. Luckily, he was only a part of our lives for 3 years before he left. I wasn't trying to kill the mood by thinking about the past, but after the day I'd had, I was struggling to keep my mind on the right track. So I was grateful when Liam's hand slipped under my shirt, and all the thoughts fell away. I glanced up at him and met his gaze. I didn't want to hold back any longer. I kissed him with all the longing in my soul. There was no more anger inside me or resentment. Only an uprising of old feelings, and there were a lot of them. Tears welled in my eyes and my chest tightened. It wasn't surprising why I had bottled them up over the years. They were intense. As Liam kissed me, I began to tug at his shirt. I wanted to feel his skin beneath my hands. I wanted him naked. He relaxed his arms, allowing me to take off his t-shirt. He was in great shape, and I loved the look of his chiseled body. I reached out and lightly grazed my fingers down his chest all the way to his abs. I sighed. Being able to touch him like this with so much freedom was blissful. His strong arms wrapped around me and I tugged off my own shirt, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine. He kissed me again long and hard, making my head spin. Then he scooped me up in his arms and carried me up the stairs, down a hallway and into his bedroom. I got a quick look around his adult bedroom, so different from the one he'd had 10 years ago. He lay me down on his bed, which was so much softer and more comfortable than the bed we'd shared at the hotel. Then he lay down beside me and I felt something click inside my chest. Like a piece of a long-forgotten puzzle. Finally complete. I'd come home. We undressed each other slowly, like it was our first time again. Everything was different. Liam kissed my lips and my eyes slid shut as his hands explored my body, and I allowed mine to explore his. The feeling of his muscles moving under my touch sent shivers of delight through me. I was already wet for him, and I heard the hitch in his breathing when he ran his fingers down my thigh. I've missed this, he breathed against my skin almost inaudibly, but I heard him loud and clear. I have too. His breath against my neck made me shiver and I grabbed his shoulders, moaning as he thrust inside me, going faster and deeper. I've missed this too, I breathed in return. He raised his face, looking directly at me, our noses touching lightly. Did I have the courage to say what had to be said? What else did I have to lose at this point? We could only grow from here. I'm yours, Liam. I always have been. I brought my hands up and caressed his sweaty skin, running a hand through his hair. This was just like our first time in the back of Liam's dad's truck. We'd been under the stars and wrapped up comfortable blankets which smelled like Liam's cologne. Back then we'd talked about our future together, making promises that would never be kept, and vowing we would never let anything tear us apart. That night, I'd hoped that feeling of bliss and happiness would never end. But it did. And so did this one. Liam rolled off me and lay on his back beside me. There was a strange expression on his face and I turned towards him, worry shooting through my heart. Is everything okay? Liam glanced at me intently for a few seconds before he moved away and sat upright. Without a word, he slid off the bed and pulled on a pair of comfortable shorts, which he'd retrieved from a nearby dresser. I can't see you anymore, Cass, he said with a solemn sigh. I sat bolt upright, holding the blankets to my chest. What? He had to be joking. I can't see until everything blows over with this lawsuit, he replied as he turned to me. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest like a bongo drum. I could barely think straight. I forced myself to think, to be smart about this. Did your lawyer advise you to do that? I asked. He nodded. Yes, and I think he's right. I can't have anything complicating this case. Especially with you working there as well. Oh. I hadn't realized my new employers would be Liam's lawyers, but it kinda made sense now that I thought about it. Okay, I get it. I suppose. Well, I was struggling too, actually. I get that you're concerned that if people see us together, they'll think we're discussing the case. I suppose. That's exactly the problem. I don't want you to get mixed up with all my mess. Any of it. That sounded a bit weak. But I'm here to support you. You have to know I'd stand by you through this, I said, then I realized something. But you don't want me to, do you? Liam sighed heavily. I just don't want to get hurt in the process, Cass. Why would I get hurt? I asked as I slowly stood from the bed, wrapped in a sheet. Liam put his hands on his hips, but didn't say a word. My jaw dropped as my brain registered the only conclusion I could come up with. He was guilty. You did it, didn't you? Did what? I bit my lip, almost too afraid to say the words out loud. You sexually harassed her, didn't you? I'd never thought Liam was capable of that, but then again, I didn't know him anymore. He wasn't the same man I fell in love with all those years ago. He was a different person with a completely different life, and there was no room in that life for me. My heart broke in one almighty powerful crack. Tears welled and fell down my cheeks, and I swiped angrily at them with my hands. Liam was staring at me with wide eyes and eyebrows that had climbed high on his forehead. You honestly think I would do that? You should know me better than that. I took a few steps towards him, not sure what to believe anymore. I thought I did. I thought I knew you, but the 18-year-old version of you, the one I loved, is still that same person who hurt me. The one who left me, without telling me why. Even now, 10 years later, you still can't tell me. I loved you with everything inside me, and I believed you loved me the same way, but you can't even spare me the decency of telling me what happened. Why did you leave me, Liam? I had waited over 10 years to say this to him, but his expression was more underwhelming than I thought it would be. He lowered his gaze, which lowered my chances of getting an answer, and I reached down where my clothes lay in a pile. I'm sick of this, Liam, I said and started to get dressed. Don't I deserve to hear the truth? Of course you do. I just can't tell you. You can't or you won't? I asked and pulled my pants up. Fucking asshole. What did it matter now? 10 years on and he still had no accountability. No courage to admit that he did the wrong thing. What a coward. It's not that simple, Cass, he continued to argue with me. Nothing is ever simple with you, is it? I muttered as I slipped my t-shirt over my head. I can't. Why not? I insisted. He began to turn away and I yelled at him. I was sick of all this lying. Liam, just tell me. No matter what it is. Just tell me. He whirled around, his eyes blazing with anger. Because your mom told me to leave. I froze, my vision blurred by impending tears which rushed to the surface faster than I could stop them. Don't you dare pin this on her. She was dead. Couldn't he just leave her in peace? It's the truth, Cass. That was why I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want you to hate her after she died, he explained. Could it be possible? Would my mom have really sent him away? What did she say to you? I asked quietly. She told me that she wanted you to have everything you deserved in life, and that I was going to hold you back. Not literally, but because you loved me so much and you were willing to give everything up for me. She wanted you to fulfill all your dreams, not sacrifice them for anyone. Hot tears stung the back of my throat and made my eyes water. I could hear those words in her voice now. She would have done that. It wasn't for just anyone. It was for you, I corrected, and back then I would have literally done anything for him. Given up school, relocated, had babies the moment he wanted them. Anything for Liam. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You shouldn't do that for anyone, Cass. But I would have, I said quietly as I heard the truth in his words. And I would do it again, if I was given the chance. My life fell apart after you left. My mom watched me cry myself to sleep for months and she didn't say anything. She wanted the best for you. I wiped away the tears, a sob rising in my throat. What a waste. All because other people had decided what was best for me. So you think the life I led without you, the emptiness I felt every day, the rejection and the constant feeling of never being good enough was the best life for me? I yelled. Because that's bullshit, Liam. You went to UC Denver just like you wanted. You were first year class. I walked away from him and threw my hands up in the air. Yes, that was part of my plan, sure, but all I ever wanted was you, Liam. Don't you get that? I understand you wanted me to be happy and have the best possible life, but only I get to decide that. Not you or my mom. Me and only me, I said, fighting back the tears that thickened my throat. You don't understand how bad it was for me after you left without telling me why. I had a constant ache in my chest. Every sad song I listened to seemed to be about loneliness and heartache, and every happy song reminded me of how we used to be and how close we once were. Cass? You know what hurt me the most, Liam? It wasn't because you left, for my benefit as it turns out. It was the trauma that followed. It was waking up and checking my phone for the messages that weren't there. It was going to sleep, wanting to hear your voice, knowing I'd never hear it again. It was like starting my life over without any idea where to begin. That was how lost I felt. When he stood there like an idiot, I couldn't take it anymore. I was pouring my heart out and he was just standing there. I whirled around, stomped out of his bedroom and down the hallway. Cass, wait, he called out after me as I ran down the steps. You have no right to fuck with my feelings. Not again. I yelled at him. Cass, please. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, he grabbed my hand and spun me around. I'm sorry, Cass. Yeah, I said bitterly as I wiped the tears from my cheek. I'm sorry too. I wish I could go back to the day I met you and walk the other way. Pretend I didn't see you because honestly, it would have saved me so much hurt and pain. His face fell, hurt rippling across his eyes. You don't mean that. Like hell I do, I snapped as I broke free from his grasp and left. Tears of anger ran down my cheeks as I climbed into my car and drove away. I wasn't sure exactly where I was going, but I drove anyway. Maybe it would give me the clarity I desperately needed.
Chapter 10. Liam. It was my calls that were being ignored now, and frankly, I knew I deserved it. I deserved every bit of anger and resentment Cass wanted to throw at me. I'd been wrong to assume I knew what was best for her. We all had the right to choose our own path, and only Cass could decide what that was. Unfortunately, at barely 18 years old, I hadn't given her the chance. I couldn't help but pace around the house, trying to call her every hour. She'd been avoiding me since she stormed out of my house last night. It was Saturday, so she wasn't at work. She was probably at home on the couch, covered in her favorite blanket, watching a movie that would only made her cry more. She'd done the same thing when she heard her dad was having an affair with one of the women in town, and again when one of her best friends walked away from her after a misunderstanding. I wanted to go over to her house, but I didn't want to make things worse. I was as clueless as ever when it came to Cass. My father had found my teenage years amusing. When I came home and told him the stories of how I'd failed with girls saying all the wrong things, or simply not saying anything at all. With Cass it was the same way. Even though I was part of the high school football team and started to hang out with the more popular kids, I still had a hard time talking to her at the start. But she'd made me better. That was the reason I did what I did back then. I loved her too much to stand in the way of her future, her success. I wanted her to go to school as she had dreamed of doing, to become an even more amazing woman than she already was. I still couldn't quite believe how badly I'd screwed everything up again. Even after I'd told her what she wanted to know, I'd still driven her away. I shook my head and collapsed into a chair. The way she'd stormed out of here last night meant she'd probably never speak to me again. I had to fix it. I couldn't leave it like this. I'd already wasted a decade without her. I couldn't continue on to make the same mistakes. I had to tell her everything. Admit that even after all these years, I still loved her. I had to promise that I would never make the mistake of letting her go again. I hadn't stopped thinking about her since the day I'd left her, but I'd been too much of a coward to contact her. I couldn't be that guy anymore. Cass deserved so much more. She deserved better, and that was exactly what I was going to give her. I was a better man now than the scared boy who'd left the moment Cass's mom had told me to. I'd never leave her again. I grabbed my keys and jumped in the car, determined to get to Cass as fast as possible. I glanced at the digital clock on the dash, and a thought occurred to me. I wasn't going to find her at home. It was after 3. She was at the hospital visiting Nathan, her little brother. I'd kept tabs on Cass and her brother ever since I left home. My dad phoned me regularly, telling me how Cass's mom and Nathan were doing, and when Cass went to visit them, which wasn't very often. He'd called me the minute he found out that Cass's mother passed away, and when Cass returned to Crested Butte. He even spoke to Cass a few times when she decided to relocate to Denver after college. I wasn't sure whether he was solely responsible for making her decide to come to start over here, but I sure was grateful. I drove in the direction of the hospital Nathan was admitted to, and when I noticed Cass's car, I breathed a sigh of relief. I'd made the right choice. I parked my car a few spots away from hers and hurried to the entrance, not wanting to wait another minute before I saw her again. As I stepped inside, I glanced around, looking for someone to ask for directions. I approached the reception desk, and a middle-aged, red-haired woman smiled warmly at me. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I help you with something?" she asked. "I'm looking for Nathan Moore's room." "Are you a friend or a family member?" she asked. "A friend. We used to live in the same town. I know his sister Cassidy," I answered. "Can I just see some identification, sir? You're going to have to check in." "Of course," I said and handed her my driver's license. She took one look at it, pursing her lips. "You really are from Crested Butte?" "I am." She handed my license back to me and tapped her finger on the sign-in sheet in front of me. "He's in room 215, second floor." "Thank you." I quickly filled in the sheet and signed. She smiled and pointed to her left. "The elevators are that way." "Thanks." I made my way to the elevator as per the woman's instructions and waited for the elevator doors to open. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the second floor. It only took a couple of seconds until I was hurrying down the hallway towards room 215. I couldn't stop the smile that spread across my face, nor the flutter of anticipation that wove through my belly. When I reached the door, I found it slightly ajar, and I heard voices coming from inside. Cassidy's. And Nathan's. I stepped back, pressing my back against the wall, and stood quietly. It wasn't my intention to eavesdrop on their conversation, but as soon as I heard my name being mentioned, I couldn't walk in there. "Liam's here in Denver," Cassidy told her brother. "Liam who broke your heart after high school?" Nathan asked. "The one and only." I sighed. Would I always be that guy? "What's he doing here? Is he stalking you or something?" "No, he lives here actually." "Did you see him?" Nathan asked, and there was a long pause. "Oh no, Cassie. Don't tell me you and Liam." "Yes, it happened okay. Twice." That's way too much information." "You asked?" I couldn't stop my lips from lifting a little. Cass was nothing if not honest. And straightforward. Two of the things I loved most about her. In all fairness, Cassie, I didn't actually ask, but that's beside the point. "You saw him?" "Yeah." She sighed. But nothing about us is easy anymore. We talk, then we end up fighting all the time. Well, considering what happened, that's only natural, in my opinion. Plus, it's been 10 years? You've both probably changed a lot. Out of the mouth of babes. Some things stay the same, however. Once a scumbag, always a scumbag. I cringed at Cass's words and rested my head against the wall. Was that really what she thought of me? Did you know Mom told him to leave? That she wanted me to achieve everything I wanted, without being held back. By Liam, by love, by my feelings for him. She wanted me to have no regrets. And do you? Have no regrets? Oh, I have a lot of regrets. Most of them are about not being with Liam. When I was with him, I never doubted the way he made me feel. Like I was important to him. I really haven't felt that way since he left. You were important to me, Cass. You still are. Do you still love him? Another long pause. I never stopped, really. Even though he hurt me, he says that only wanted me to be happy. I just don't understand, Nathan. He did that for me, he let me go. Even though I was miserable, and even though I hated him for it. It's such a big sacrifice to make. I don't know what to do. Nathan made a groaning noise. You two make my head spin. You always have. Cass chuckled. I think that's the whole dynamic of our relationship. It's not like any other relationship I've ever been in. We're confusing, complicated, and downright impossible, but our love was real. I just wish that I could work out a way to tell him that. That's my cue. I took a deep breath before stepping away from the wall and approached the door. I knocked on it softly and heard Nathan say, "Maybe you still can." I peered through the opening, and both Nathan and Cassidy glanced directly at me. Cass stood up from the chair beside the bed and stared at me. Her eyes were slightly red, but she looked as beautiful as ever. Hey Liam, Nathan said with a crooked smile. What a coincidence. We were just talking about you. You were? I asked as I entered the room and shook Nathan's hand. Hey buddy. How are you? I'm better. I can wiggle my toes without too much effort. The doctor said that I could go home sooner than planned, which is awesome. Then I get to start with physical therapy to learn to walk again. But I'm looking forward to it. I swear I'm never going to sit on my ass again after this. I chuckled and smiled at him. I'm glad you're doing better, buddy. That accident was pretty bad. How do you know about the accident? Nathan asked. I have my sources, I shrugged nonchalantly and shot a brief glance at Cass. She glared at me, her eyes narrowed and her arms crossed across her chest. I had to make sure my favorite little slugger was alive and well. You're still calling me that, Nathan muttered and rolled his eyes. Some things never change, right, Cassie? Cass cleared her throat and turned to Nathan. Will you excuse us for a second? Sure, I'll just wait here, Nathan joked. Good to see you again, Liam. Same here, Nathan, I said with a grin before Cass grabbed my sleeve and practically dragged me out of the room. We stepped out into the hallway and she walked down to the next door. It was an empty private family waiting room, and we both went inside. She closed the door and turned to me. What are you doing here? I came to see Nathan, I answered. And I knew you'd be here too. How did you know I was here? You told me Nathan was in Sutter Hospital, and I remembered you told me the visiting times on a Saturday. You remembered all that? She asked. Cass, I haven't forgotten anything when it comes to you. I remember your fluffy blanket, and the way you curled up on the couch every time you were sad. I remember you prefer the left swing on the swing set because the middle one made you feel unsafe. I remember you always chew the tip of your straw before taking the first sip of your soda. I watched as Cass's eyes filled with tears as I spoke, recalling all the things that made me love her more. The little things. The things that mattered. And I remember that purple and red mug you used to have. It was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen, but you loved it. You'd take it along to all the football games I forced you to come watch me play. I wanted to go, she said in a small voice. You never told me that. I thought you hated football. I do, but I went because you were playing. You've always made sacrifices for me, Cass. I didn't want to be the reason you didn't go to college. Who the hell was I to stand in your way? You were the love of my life, and before last week, you were the one who got away. The one I would always think of, whether I was with someone or not. The one I would always compare everyone else to. There was no one who came close to you. I took a step towards her and said, I wanted you to have an amazing life, Cass. I had an amazing life with you in it, Liam. Why couldn't you see that? I did, and I'd loved our lives together. But her mom had been so convincing. You weren't the only one who didn't feel deserving, I sighed. What are you talking about? She asked. I never thought I was good enough for you, Cass. And when your mom came to talk to me and said it would be better if I left, allowing you to be something better, it just made sense. Your mother never liked me for some reason. She told me that I was making a rebel out of you. She smiled softly. That's probably because you were a lot like my dad when he was young. Charming, spontaneous. And she was afraid that you would hurt me the same way my dad hurt her. I'm not your dad, I said defensively. I would never cheat on Cass. Never. I know. At least you admit your mistakes. Yes, I answered and approached her. Her hand was inches away from mine, but as I was about to take it, she took my hand instead. Say what you want to say, Liam. Right now. I took a deep breath and looked her directly in the eyes. I'm not going to tell you all the things I have done wrong in my life because we'd be here all goddamn day, but I will say that I'm sorry, truly sorry for the pain I caused you. You deserved better. At that stage, I thought I was protecting you from me, but in actual fact, I was depriving you of the one thing you taught me. To love and be accepted. Cass smiled softly, the tears filling up her eyes again, but she pursed her lips to prevent them from spilling over onto her cheeks. My life is complicated and stressful right now, but there is one thing I am absolutely sure of, and that is I love you, Cassidy Moore, and that is something which will never ever change. She whispered, I've waited so long to hear you say that, and it was worth every single minute of waiting. I pulled her close, and our lips met in a moment that was overdue by a decade. A moment filled with so much love and understanding that it overwhelmed me. Our lips parted slowly, and Cass glanced up at me, her eyes shining with happiness. Why did you have to make me fall so hard for you? I'm so sorry, I murmured. I bet you are, she smiled and pulled a little further away. About what I said to you, Liam. I didn't mean most of it. I know you're not the kind of guy who would sexually harass a woman, and I'm sorry I insulted you like that. I know you'd never lie to me about something like that either. I'm sure it feels like your integrity is on the line and this trial is going to get harder before it gets any better, we both know that, but I am here for you. I squeezed her hands. I don't want to pull you into my complicated life. She laughed. Our life has been complicated since the day we met, so I'm kind of used to it. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders. We'll get through this together, I promise. I glanced down at her and said, thank you. And I'm sorry I pushed you away when I needed you the most. We all make mistakes, Liam. It's how we handle the repercussions of those mistakes that matter. My mouth curved into a smile, and I brushed a lock of blonde hair off her face. For years, when people asked me if I had any regrets about my past, I used to just say your name, and that you were the one who got away. Well, you never have to say that ever again. I'm yours forever, I always have been, and I always will be, she smiled at me, her blue eyes sparkling with sincerity. At that moment, in the private family waiting room at the hospital, with her arms wrapped around my shoulders, her eyes sparkling just like the first day I met her, I was home. Right then I realized that home wasn't a place, it was where my heart felt the safest. Mine was with her. Always. The end.